Chapter 5002. Who would have thought that the two women would suddenly attack, two daggers coming out of their sleeves, aiming for the young crown princess' neck. Yuan Zhen's heart tightens, and even the voice that comes out of his mouth trembles. Quick, someone come quickly, take down these two female assassins. If they hurt this little ancestor, in his majesty's rage, he would most likely implicate everyone present. After following by this person's side for a few days, how could Yuan Zhen not understand? This His Majesty, protected the young crown princess like she was his treasure. He absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to touch a single strand of her hair. Whoever dares to touch her can only wait for bad luck. But Arbor doesn't even spare the two women a glance. She directly reaches out a slender jade hand and grabs the dagger that's coming for her neck with her bare hands. Crown Princess. Yuan Zhen is so frightened that he almost kneels down in front of the Crown Princess. How could such a small hand that's like white tofu so casually grab the other party's dagger? Only to hear a dang sound. The young Crown Princess' jade hand is like a diamond drill, directly cutting off half of the dagger. The concubine's face is filled with disbelief. Yuan Zhen and the others' ashen complexions also slightly relax. Before they can even take a deep breath, they see the young crown princess fly straight up, like a nimble leopard, and send a flying kick out. She stupidly kicks one of the concubines in the face. Bang! That person is sent flying, her back heavily smashing into an evergreen tree. Her entire person rolls down from the tree in a very sorry state, groaning twice. How could she still get up? The other concubine is completely stunned, the dagger in her hand momentarily not being able to hold it steady, and it falls to the ground with a clang sound. Arbor knits her brows. The person behind the scenes went through so much trouble, reaching into the palace and making all sorts of arrangements, only to arrange such a joke. First, he bribed eunuch Yang by Empress Dowager Lu's side, and then let him use some resources to lure 3 palace maids to do his bidding. In the end, he just wanted to lure her into the back garden and let 2 concubines with low cultivation to kill her. It was completely unreasonable for them to go through so much trouble and only send out 2 low-level assassins. There was something fishy about this matter. Arbor took a step forward, and the pale-faced concubine couldn't help but cry out, "Prince, Your Highness. Ah! Help! Help!" The concubine only managed to utter a few words before she was pressed down by a group of guards. Her face touched the ground and her entire body was pressed to the ground. She struggled bitterly but was unable to move. "Tu Lang, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for them to kill me? If we sisters die, the prince will definitely not let you go." Suddenly, the treetops moved, and a huge gust of wind blew down from the sky. Crown Princess. Yuan Zhen and the others only felt the ground tremble. When they looked up, they saw a strange thing with a wolf head and a human body that was 2.5 meters long appear in the imperial garden. His fist was as big as a giant alms bowl. When he punched towards the little crown princess's head, Yuan Zhen and the others' hearts couldn't help but clench. In front of this tall giant, the petite crown princess was simply like a little child. She could be crushed with a single finger. So the main character was waiting for her here. Arbor's lips curled into a cold smile. She leaned to the side and quickly dodged the big fist that was like a copper alms bowl. Everyone only heard a loud bang. Chapter 5003. At the same time, at the north gate of the Phoenix Emperor City, a carriage with a blue canopy passed by the long line of people moving forward as fast as lightning. The wheels of the carriage rolled over the bluestone road, making a series of sounds. The pedestrians in front of the line couldn't help but turn their heads to look at the person who cut the line. Marquis and Xingho is ordered to leave the capital. He has something to do. A fast horse came forward, holding a round token in his hand, and waved it at the guards. The two guards immediately saluted respectfully, glanced at the token, and hurriedly asked the pedestrians to move to the side. "Marquis, thank you. Please." Marquis and Xingho's carriage was about to pass through the arched bridge of the city gate. Just then, he heard a series of rumbling horse hooves coming from behind, followed by a cold shout, "Everyone, listen to my order. Take down Xingho." Hundreds of soldiers with spears and swords swarmed forward. In just a few seconds, Xingho's carriage was completely surrounded. The curtain of the carriage was gently lifted, and Xingho's thin old face appeared at the window. He smiled at a middle-aged bearded general who was chasing after him on a horse. "East Mountain King, why have you led your men here?" "I've been summoned to do something." "Marquis, please. His Majesty wants to see you." And Xingho's thin face showed a faint smile. He laughed dryly and said, "I don't know why His Majesty summons me." East Mountain King Wu Heng said expressionlessly, "Marquis, you must be joking. Since His Majesty summons you, it's your duty as a minister. How can you inquire so many people before meeting His Majesty?" And Xingho's smiling face turned gloomy little by little. The corners of his mouth moved, and he said coldly, "I'm not feeling well these days. I'm afraid His Majesty is sick." "Why don't East Mountain King report to His Majesty?" "Marquis, do you want to defy the edict?" East Mountain King Wu Heng glanced at Xingho with a faint smile, fiddling with a sharpened dagger in his hand. East Mountain King said with a smile, "I'm afraid Marquis has no room to refuse." And Xingho's face turned green and white, and his palms on his knees were tightly clenched into fists. "Guards, escort Xingho back to the palace to see His Majesty." "Yes." Hundreds of soldiers surrounded the carriage. Two of them even straddled the coachman's seat and kicked the trembling coachman off the carriage. And Xingho was silent for 2 seconds. Then he sneered and said, "East Mountain King, you don't have to do this. If Marquis is willing to cooperate with this prince, then this prince naturally does not want to force my own colleagues." "Humph." And Xingho gritted his teeth, slammed down the curtain and sat in the carriage. However, in just a moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted again. Wu Heng, the East Mountain King, jumped up with a smile and sat in the same carriage as Xingho. Xingho was furious. "What is the meaning of this, Wang Ye? This prince is a little tired today. Let me borrow the Marquis's carriage." Your Highness doesn't need to be like this. Since this Marquis has already agreed to go with you to see His Majesty, I naturally can't do anything else. You don't have to monitor me so closely." The Eastern Mountain King, Wu Heng, shook his head and smiled. "That's hard to say. There's no guarantee that the Marquis doesn't have some talismans or treasures that can teleport. Since this prince is following orders, I naturally have to take precautions. East Mountain King is really loyal." East Mountain King, Wu Heng didn't mind the sarcasm in his words. He smiled and said, "It's my duty to share His Majesty's worries. There's no such thing as loyalty." And Xingho closed his eyes and said nothing. Chapter 5004. This East Mountain King Wu Heng was indeed a character. Originally, this king with a different surname had a withered number of talents in the king's mansion and was gradually declining. He didn't expect that because of his unique vision and meritorious service in supporting the new emperor, the entire East Mountain King's mansion was now being used again. And Xingho sighed in his heart. He was indeed too anxious and hadn't made sufficient preparations. His rash action had indeed exposed him. However, the desire to avenge his daughter was like an ant gnawing on a fire, tormenting him day and night. He had no choice but to do this. East Mountain King Wu Heng saw that he closed his eyes and didn't speak. Seeing that they had been officials for many years, he couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. why do you have to do this? And Xingho opened his eyes and couldn't help but sneer, it's easy for you to say. If your daughter was humiliated and killed like this, I'll see if you can face it easily. Bam! Tu Lang's fist smashed heavily on the ground. The cobblestone ground of the small path had completely cracked under his heavy punch. Everyone couldn't help but feel terrified. This person's external martial arts were like a meat shield and were quite sturdy and durable. Several guards rushed up and pierced their swords with spiritual power, but they couldn't cut through his external defense. On the other hand, this man with great strength swung his arm and flung the guards away, causing them to fall into the surrounding grass and flowers. Arbor leaned to the side to avoid his heavy punch and turned to glare at this person. Heh, being fat means you can fight. What a big joke. She raised her hand and slapped several defense talismans and gravity talismans on her body, wrapping herself properly. Then, she stood to the side. She hooked her finger at the strange wolf-headed man. Today, if you can shake me even a little bit, I'll surrender. When Yuan Zhen and the others heard this, their faces turned even paler. They couldn't help but cry out in grief in their hearts, Crown Princess, can you not court death? This wolf-headed monster looks extremely strong. If he gets close to you, even if your divine skills are unparalleled, I'm afraid you'll be at a disadvantage. Moreover, this little crown princess is too boastful. What did it mean to be slightly shaken? In other words, as long as this strange man pushed the little crown princess even half a step away, the crown princess would be at his mercy. Come. The little stoic raised her hand and beckoned at that howling werewolf. The two concubines looked at each other, supported each other, and stood up in a sorry state. They were just looking for an opportunity to sneak away, but unexpectedly, Yuanjin signaled with her eyes and sent a few old nannies forward to block their way. Two guests, before this matter is completely resolved, please stay here. The two women's faces alternated between green and red. One of them couldn't help but scold in a low voice, since you know we are guests, why are you blocking our way? Yuanjin sneered, let's wait for your prince to come over and report this matter to him face to face. As he spoke, the werewolf waved his hands, and a dozen punches flew towards the young crown princess's face. Gusts of wind blew, and the shadows of his fists overlapped. Those dozen punches were about to land on the young crown princess. Suddenly, Duan Yu heard a group of people hurrying over from outside the garden. He saw this heart-wrenching scene from afar. With an angry shout of, "You dare," he had already rushed forward. The Devil Emperor's sword abruptly appeared in his palm, and he slashed at the werewolf's neck without another word. "Your Majesty, please don't attack. This is my barbarian tribe's brave warrior, Tu Lang, this prince's personal guard." Duan Yu couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense. Chapter 5005. The Devil Emperor's sword in his hand had already swiftly brushed past that werewolf's neck. With a swish, a silvery white flame emerged on his neck, burning a bloody hole. Everyone couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Tu Lang's skin was as tough as copper and iron, and it was impossible to easily penetrate his impenetrable defense. At the same time, Tu Lang's dozen punches had already landed on the little stoic's defensive talismans. Everyone's eyelids twitched incessantly as they heard several thump-thump-thump-thump sounds. They watched as Tu Lang's attacks broke through the defensive barrier layer by layer. Seeing that the little crown princess's last defensive barrier was about to be penetrated, the crown princess seemed to be in imminent danger. Unexpectedly, the expressionless little crown princess took out another handful of talismans from her pocket and pasted them all on her body with several smack 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 sounds. Layer after layer of defensive barriers appeared around her once again. Meanwhile, the gales that Tu Lang sent out were already exhausted and had no more strength to break through the little crown princess's defenses. Everyone couldn't resist twitching their mouths as they silently glanced at the silent crown princess. As expected, such a powerful wave of attacks from Tu Lang couldn't shake the little crown princess in the slightest. It couldn't even make her move a single toe. It was as if the little crown princess had grown out of the ground and was rooted there motionlessly. Her posture was as straight as a pine tree, and only the hem of her clothes and strands of hair fluttered in the wind. "You've lost." After a long time, the stupefied crowd finally heard the crown princess say this. What to do? They inexplicably felt this was a bit comical. "It's my turn to hit you now." The little crown princess expressionlessly rolled up her sleeves. "Everyone, did we mishear or did we not notice it earlier? When did the crown prince consort say that she would fight with Tu Lang once each? I'll beat you to death." As the little crown princess said this, she continued to paste several dozen acceleration talismans on her body with smack smack smack. Multi-attack talismans. Multi-attack talismans. Multi-defense talismans. Multi-defense talismans. Multiple speed talismans. The little crown princess had put over 100 talismans on her body, and everyone's expression was almost numb. She suddenly moved. She leaped into the air and punched towards the werewolf's head without hesitation. The gravity talisman made her feel very heavy. With a ferocious strike, the wind from the fist carried a whistling force as it heavily smashed into the werewolf's head. Pft! The man spat out a mouthful of blood and stumbled forward a dozen steps. His body swayed a few times. In the end, he couldn't support himself and collapsed to the ground with a boom. In the huge imperial garden, it was completely silent. Duan Yu's lips involuntarily twitched, and it was quite a while before he coughed lightly. "Ahem, Jojo." He walked forward and wanted to pull her to his side, but when he pulled, he realized that the little crown princess was rooted to the ground and did not move at all. He actually couldn't budge her. Duan Yu couldn't resist facepalming. How many talismans did this fool paste on her body? Wasn't this cheating and bullying? Prince Yuhua, who walked over with Duan Yu, felt his jaw nearly drop. He looked dumbfoundedly at the little crown princess and suddenly pointed at her and exclaimed, It's you." He had an impression of this person. "The crown princess of the divine province, why are you here?" He truly had an impression of this stoic-faced woman. Chapter 5006. Treacherous and vicious. Utterly unreasonable. When they first met at the academy, she kicked him squarely in the chest. No one else could do that, right? His brother, Prince Zulu, also died at the hands of this unkind little butcher. In reality, their barbarian tribe had yet to settle the score with her, but this woman was unsatisfied. She dared to do anything brazenly, kicking him the moment they met, and now severely injuring his bodyguard. Quick, take a look." Prince Daiwa quickly waved his hand, ordering people to check guard Tu Lang's injuries. Tu Lang was directly sprawled on the ground from the young crown princess's punch. Two of Prince Daiwa's royal guards hastily rushed up, but they were unable to turn Tu Lang's massive body around even after exerting all their strength. The two awkwardly reached out to check his pulse before quickly turning around to report, "Reporting to Your Highness the Prince, guard Tu Lang is already not breathing." What? Prince Daiwa's head was throbbing in anger, and he glared fixedly at Arbor as he shouted furiously, "UWH. What are you shouting for?" Duan Yu irritably interrupted Prince Daiwa's roar and swept a displeased glance at the prince. "You dare to scare Jojo? You must be tired of living." Duan Yu's handsome face darkened as he impatiently retorted, "Daiwa, you better give us a clear explanation. Why did you assign your bodyguard to attack the crown princess? And what's up with those two royal concubines of yours?" Prince Daiwa looked at him in bewilderment, his nose huffing and puffing. Your Majesty of Zhangzhou. This prince still wants you to give me an explanation. Why is this crown princess of the divine province in your palace? What improper relationship do you two have? Why did she attack this prince's bodyguard for no reason? Don't think you're in the right just because you're loud. This prince is telling you, if you don't give me an explanation, we won't let this matter rest. This prince still wants to spread this news and smear you too. The Emperor of Zhangzhou, the crown princess of the divine land, Prince Kuawa, don't bully the crown princess for not being good with words. Don't think that you can slander others just because the crown princess doesn't say anything. Yuanzhen said angrily, it was your two concubines who started this. When we were passing by with the crown prince consort, for some reason, those two concubines of yours suddenly attacked the crown prince consort. Nonsense. A trace of anger flashed across Prince Dewa's tanned face. He turned back to look at the two disheveled concubines and said angrily, you beat my two beloved concubines to such a state, and now you dare to accuse others. My two beloved concubines are just low-level cultivators. Would they be so stupid as to provoke the crown princess of the divine land? It's not like he has nothing better to do. Yuanjinjin was so angry that she laughed, they're just that brainless. What evidence do you have? Prince Dewa roared angrily, looking like his intelligence had been insulted by Yuanjin. Little crown princess took out a jade image talisman from her pocket and threw it into the air. Everyone's mouth twitched silently. Don't you think this fellow is sinister? She actually recorded the entire battle scene just now. She didn't argue with you, much less argue with you. She just threw out the evidence directly. The image projection was clear at a glance. From the moment the crown princess stood here, she hadn't said much. After she finished speaking, she was immediately rebuked by the two concubines. The two women were even very bold. They took out daggers from their sleeves and slashed at the crown princess' neck. It was clear that there was no room for argument. Prince Dewa looked like he had eaten shit. Chapter 5007. After stammering for half a beat, Prince Dewa finally found his voice and turned to glance at Duanyu. Your Majesty, this must be a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. This short and stout dark-skinned prince strode to the two trembling concubines and rewarded them with a slap each with a wave of his hand. You two must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall, right? You even dare to provoke the crown princess of the divine province. You don't know that the crown princess of the divine province's peerless martial prowess is unrivaled in this world. Even this prince can only concede defeat in front of the crown princess. Why aren't you scramming over and apologizing to the crown princess? Do you still need this prince to teach you? Duanyu knitted his brows when he heard his sour words. His sarcastic tone seemed to be praising Qiao Qiao, but in fact, it was full of sarcasm. Those two concubines promptly prostrated themselves on the ground and cried out timidly, we were blind and didn't know it was the crown princess who had graced us with her presence. The young crown princess flicked her finger, and two ebony talismans flew to the concubines and hit their foreheads with two smacks. Prince Dewa's eyes flared with anger, and he was about to shout when he heard the young crown princess's cold voice slowly rise. Who instigated you two to detain me here? The faces of the two concubines were muddle-headed. They only felt that the cold voice was echoing in their heads. They couldn't help but answer, we were entrusted by our fellow villagers to create trouble in the imperial garden today. As long as we can detain a noble who is passing by, we don't need to do anything else. Tu Lang can handle the rest. Impossible. Prince Dewa shouted angrily, how could Tu Lang attack the crown princess without my orders? The two concubines' eyes were lifeless, but they said in unison, did Prince forget? It was you who told Tu Lang to protect us well. Once we encounter danger in the noble's hands, Tu Lang will naturally save us from danger. Prince Dewa's face turned even uglier. His face was yellow as shit. He opened his mouth but was unable to refute. The order was indeed given by him. This lustful prince of a barbarian tribe changed women as quickly as he changed clothes. Often, because he doted on his concubines, he wished that he could give them all the good things in the world. When he no longer doted on them, he would abandon them. The reason why he left Tu Lang with the 2 concubines this time was because 2 days ago, the 2 concubines came to him and cried, saying that the main wife made things difficult for them, and their days were difficult. Therefore, he left Tu Lang by their side to protect them. Who would have thought that this would spoil things? What benefits did you 2 take from your fellow countrymen? Hand it over. The 2 of them were expressionless. They took out several bags of spirit coins from their inner worlds and placed them in front of the crowd along with 2 spirit tools. They were still kneeling on the ground, motionless. Prince Nava, the facts are here, and the goods are there, and the bribe is here. What else do you have to say? Prince Nua's face flickered back and forth like a rainbow. Arbor asked expressionlessly, one last question. Why did you have to attack here? Why did you have to lure her to the royal garden and prevent her from leaving? Was it just to have Tu Lang fight with her? Or did you have other motives? Sir Jojo turned around and met Duan Yu's eyes. Let's go. The 2 of them had just flown up nimbly when they suddenly felt a heavy gravity envelop them from midair. There was a huge bang under their feet, and the entire ground caved in instantly. Chapter 5008. The 2 dumbfounded concubines were the first to fall. Before he could even react, his body had already been pierced by several sharp knives from the ground with a puchit sound. The 2 of them widened their eyes in horror and died before they could even cry out. Prince Dewa was more agile. Although he immediately levitated into the air, the gravity above his head caused his body to sink down. He stabilized his sinking body with great difficulty and barely managed to stay afloat in the air. When he looked down, he saw rows upon rows of gleaming snow-white blades aimed at him uniformly. If he really fell down just now, he probably wouldn't have ended up well even if he had a defensive barrier. When Prince Dewa thought of this, he involuntarily shuddered, and his eyes swiftly looked in Duan Yu and Arbor's direction. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Where are they? His Majesty Zhangzhou and the Crown Princess of the Divine Province were both gone. Not only were those 2 people gone, but those royal maids and guards beside them were also gone. It seemed like only their barbarian tribe's group was affected by the gravity at the scene. What the heck was going on? Where are they? Prince Nur roared, but his body suddenly sank down. This guy paled, and he hastily stabilized his body. The guards were currently channeling all the energy in their bodies to resist that gravity with bitter expressions, so how would they dare to speak rashly? When Prince Dewa saw that the guards were ignoring him, his face turned green with anger. He barely stabilized his body and roared, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry and clean up the blades below." Since the gravity couldn't be removed for the time being, what else could they do? They could only first destroy or fill up this pit of blades below. However, when Prince Dewa gave his order, everyone around him remained motionless with bitter expressions. It wasn't that they didn't want to clean up this pit of blades below, but that they couldn't move at all right now. Even speaking would affect the leakage of divine energy, let alone having them free up their hands to fill up the pit below. They were already having a hard time resisting the pressure and were struggling to hold on, so how could they have any other power to use? On the other side, the pitiful Prince Kawa felt the air in his chest dissipate a little after he finished roaring. His entire body was about to sink. He hurriedly placed his left foot on top of his right foot and gently stepped on it. He thought that he could go up 2 inches, but who would have thought he fell down a short distance again? Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to those sharp blades, his hair stood on end. How could the Emperor of Tsangzhou and the Crown Princess of the Divine Land disappear in the blink of an eye? They must have escaped when they saw that the situation was not good. How could they leave their guests in such a dangerous place? Prince De Wa of the barbarian tribe. A cold voice came from above. Prince Kawa forced himself to raise his head. After a long time, he finally saw the two figures hovering not far away. Weren't they the cunning Emperor of Tsangzhou and the Crown Princess of the Divine Land? He didn't see when these two people disappeared, and he didn't know when they appeared here again. Now that he was begging for help, his tone softened. Your Majesty of Tsangzhou, Crown Princess of the Divine Land, you two are finally here. Quick, give me a hand. Help is at the next stage. Crown Princess, please be clear. I definitely didn't do this matter of hunting you down. I have no enmity with you, so how could I bear to attack you, right? Chapter 5009. Prince Wa. Ah, yes, yes, yes. Crown Princess, please tell me, Prince Dua said hurriedly. Are you convinced? Prince Nuwa was dumbfounded. Fuck, what do I have to submit to? This Crown Prince Consort is probably a lunatic. I'm asking you if you're convinced. I submit. Prince Kawa cursed inwardly. However, since he was under someone else's roof, he had no choice but to lower his head. Now that he had to rely on someone else to save him, he could only accept whatever they said. Compensation. Duan Yu's mouth twitched as a memory suddenly surfaced. Compensation. Otherwise, I will kill him. Go ahead and kill him. He's so stupid. He deserves to die. Hey, wait, what kind of compensation do you want? Fixed price, 100 pieces of low-grade magnetite for this dog's life. It was strange that he had heard the word compensation so many times. After not hearing it for so long, he actually missed it. Now that he heard it again, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. As expected of a person, he would be so calm after receiving compensation. Just like him, when he heard the word compensation, he was completely unaffected. If Prince Do-Hua knew what this Tsang Prefecture Emperor was thinking right now, he would definitely spit in his face. Of course you wouldn't feel anything. It's not like I'm asking you to compensate me. The list of compensation is here. You just need to sign it. The faces of the guards from the barbarian tribe were all slightly distorted. Their prince was sinking lower and lower than they were. When they looked down, they saw that their prince had fallen to the level of their waists. His legs were dangling, and he was only a hair away from the sword in the pit. The most important thing was that they were suffocating under the weight of the gravity. They were holding back their strength and were unable to free up their hands to help. What are you still considering? The little stoic said with a taut face, this place is restricted by gravity and space. Someone set up a triple-strength talisman matrix. If I don't help you, all of you will die. If we die in the Tsangzhou Imperial Palace, I'm afraid that His Majesty, won't be able to answer to the barbarian tribe. Jojo, go ahead and do what you need to do. I'll handle whether you hand it over or not. Duan Yu immediately retorted. You. Prince Nuwa only felt that he could not take even half a breath in his heart, his whole body suddenly fell down. His face turned pale as he screamed in his heart, it's over. In the end, he suddenly felt his left arm being grabbed by something, and his body suddenly stopped. When he looked up, he was sweating profusely. It turned out that he had been entangled by a wooden vine. Beneath his feet, there was a gust of dense sword chi that was about to pierce through the soles of his feet. Prince Chao Hua was so scared that he almost peed his pants. Cold sweat also appeared on his head. The little stoic expressionlessly asked again, compensation. Compensation. Compensate. Prince Kawa was on the verge of breaking down. Why the fuck should I compensate? Who did I offend? Today's play had nothing to do with him at all. It was all those two concubines' fault for being greedy and not giving up on their evil intentions, causing him to be in this state. Sign it. The young crown princess tossed a scroll of compensation to Prince Kawa. With a curl, he dragged it from the air all the way to the ground. Prince Kawa's arm was held by the wooden vine, and he could barely move. He held back his tears and signed the form with trembling hands. He stamped his handprint and closed his eyes, unable to look at what was written on the paper. This was a prelude to emptying his little treasury. Arbor put away that scroll of paper and muttered to Duanyu, "We'll be waging war with the Heavenly Fate Empire later on. Stockpile more supplies and money for the army's provisions." Chapter 50-10. Phoenix. The Arch City is quite lively, huh? Zhe Qin looked left and right, his gaze sweeping the streets several times. While he was looking at other people were also looking at them. The sudden appearance of two peerless beauties on the street was like a scenic sight, instantly attracting the gazes of all the passers-by. Hee. Suddenly, a woman with gaudy features swayed her hips as she walked past the two people. She daringly threw a coquettish glance at Mo Lien and even threw her floral handkerchief embroidered with peonies in front of the two people. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked over without looking sideways and stepped on the handkerchief in passing. "Pick it up, Mo Lien. I threw it to you." Mo Lien followed suit and stepped on it before leaving, her phoenix eyes chilly. "Keep it if you like it." "Humph, I'll definitely tell my Jojo later that another woman is winking at you." "That's for you." "Ha ha ha." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal gave a very fake chuckle and rolled his eyes. "It's not funny at all." Mo Lien looked at him exasperatedly. She suddenly missed Duanyu a bit. Compared to this unreliable guy, Duanyu seemed to be more reliable in every aspect, and his brain was also more normal. Clang! The sound of a gong suddenly came from the side of the street, accompanied by a loud voice. "Debt collection by imperial decree." Mo Lien's ears twitched, and a trace of suspicion flitted through her mind. Why did these four words sound strangely familiar? Could it be a misconception? Clang. Debt collection by imperial decree. The debt collection team is now on a mission to the barbarian tribe to collect debts. The loud voice continued, 100 million spirit coins, 100 northern sea luminous pearls, 10,000 sets of special armor, 10,000 special spears. Shichin twitched his mouth as he looked in confusion at the small team walking past them. These people looked like Sangzhou guards. Each of them was in high spirits, and their cultivation levels were truly not low. High cultivation did not equate to high IQ. This operation team looked like they were retarded. Zilien, don't you think this routine is a bit familiar? Mo Lien expressionlessly twitched his mouth. Emichim. It's Jojo's trick. Pfft. Yuan Shichin was immediately amused. That's great. We've really found the right path by accident. Jojo is here. Here. Mo Lien's phoenix eyes also lit up. It's with Duanyu. Let's go. Where to? Naturally, I'm going to the Azure Palace. Mo Lien's voice was still there, but she had already drifted far away. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal waved his fan with a smile and quickly chased after her. Who is this person? Arbor knitted his brows and turned to look at Duanyu, who was sitting beside him. There was a person kneeling at the bottom of the steps. He was thin and didn't look very old, but because of his wrinkled skin, he looked very old. The palace maid who poisoned you time and time again was sent by him. Arbor turned to look at the man kneeling before him. So the incident in the Imperial Garden was also his doing. Crown Princess, Crown Princess. I just said that I was wronged, Prince Nuwa exclaimed with a mournful face. Earlier, he had carefully flipped through that 8-meter-long list and almost fainted after reading it. This little crown princess was truly a vicious person. She wanted to empty out their entire barbarian tribe. What are you wronged for? Weren't those 2 concubines who attacked your people? Yes, they were my people, but who are you? Chapter 50:11. The little crown princess didn't want to pay attention to this Prince Yuwa with his low IQ and directly shouted at the gaunt man at the bottom of the steps. Prince Yuwa shrank back and very unwillingly sat back down in his seat. His shifty eyes glanced at Aunt Yuanjin's group. Earlier in the royal garden, Yuanjin, those palace maids, and ordinary royal guards were somehow rescued in that critical situation. They all disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Speaking of which, it was strange that the Zhangzhou Emperor and the Crown Princess of the Divine Province also appeared and disappeared mysteriously, disappearing one moment and reappearing the next. He simply didn't notice what was going on with them. Yuwa naturally didn't know that the instant they were trapped in the gravity-binding talisman matrix, Arbor promptly made a decision and immediately brought Duanyu back to the star domain. She also swiftly stored Yuanjin and the others into a storage talisman, so how could Yuwa detect her movements? Moreover, the situation was critical at the time, and Yuwa and the others were struggling against the gravity at the first moment, so how could they have the time to notice them? By the time they noticed, the little stoic and the others had long disappeared. The little stoic definitely didn't come out later to save people, but to ruthlessly extort Prince Yuwa. Yuwa was too displeasing to the eye. Although he didn't participate in this matter, he had to take the blame for his 2 beloved concubines. Prince Yuwa was currently angrily glaring at the gaunt man at the bottom of the steps. He couldn't resist asking, "Who are you? Why aren't you replying? What methods did you use to bribe those 2 concubines of mine? Go in." Following this reprimand, another person was shoved inside by the royal guards. He knelt down next to the gaunt man with a plop, his head and face covered in blood. He was probably beaten up when he was resisting just now. The gaunt and elderly man looked back at him and continued to remain silent. Meanwhile, the Duke of East Mountain, Wu Heng, walked in with a group of royal guards. He cupped his hands at Duanyu, who was sitting at the head of the table, and then led his men to retreat to the side. Duanyu said dryly, "Marquis and Xingho, you've been exposed for plotting against the crown princess twice in a row, so it's useless even if you don't say a word." Duanyu beckoned Yuanjin to the side. The latter, with a stiff face, slowly walked forward with a tray and put it in front of Xingho. He lowered his head and saw 2 small porcelain bottles on the tray. His eyelids twitched. "Don't blame us for not giving you a chance to argue." Duanyu coldly stated, "There are only 2 paths before you right now. The first option was to tell the truth and commit suicide by taking poison. The second is to say nothing and let your 9 clans accompany you to the Yellow Springs. Don't think that you can fool people by sending all your siblings out of the city to the countryside." And Xingho suddenly raised his head and looked at the young emperor with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. "You caught them." It had only been a short while. It was 3 days ago that he ordered the palace maids to poison him. It had been 3 days since his family left the imperial capital. Who would have thought that this heartless man would capture his sister-in-law's entire family? The corners of Xingho's mouth twitched slightly. This old man didn't do anything wrong. It's only right and proper to avenge my daughter. Arbor knitted his brows and sized him up. "Do I know you?" He had never seen this person before. What did he mean by avenging his daughter? What nonsense was this? What did this have to do with anything? Chapter 50:12. Just as Duanyu was about to remind Jojo, and Xingho shouted angrily, "Does the crown princess still remember Xiangchang?" The young crown princess was pondering where she had seen this person before, so she reflexively rubbed her stomach after being yelled at. She also retorted angrily, "What are you shouting for? Do you think you're in the right just because you have a loud voice?" Sir Jojo jumped in fright. "What a lunatic. That daughter of yours, I've never seen her before." "You're crazy, right?" Duan Yu's mouth twitched. He really wanted to interrupt and tell the indignant Marquis and Xingho, "You only talk about Xiangchang, but the young crown prince consort really can't remember who they were. You have to talk about what happened between the two of them in order to evoke the young crown prince consort's memories most of the time. The young crown princess couldn't match a person's face to a person's name. She was face blind since she was young, so she improved a bit after she grew up, but her memory was truly terrible. So from another perspective, it was really not easy for the young crown prince consort to remember someone who was fortunate enough to be able to match their name, Cough. The young crown princess glanced back at Duan Yu in confusion. Why did this guy have such an indescribable expression? How couldn't Xingho understand the little stoic? He only thought she was refusing to admit to harming Xiangchang in front of His Majesty. Tears streamed down his face as he shouted, "Arbor, you're actually so shameless. You dare to do something but don't dare to admit it. You and my daughter, Xiangchang, only had a small dispute during the experiential learning, but you had to fight to the point that you wouldn't stop until one of us dies. On Xiangchang's way back to Zhangzhou, you intercepted her and even cruelly murdered her. You deranged woman. Do you know that when my daughter was transported back to the estate, there wasn't a single piece of unharmed flesh on her body?" And Xingho's eyes emitted a cold glint. "I'm avenging my daughter, so shouldn't I kill you? When I complained to the late emperor, he wasn't willing to help me seek justice. So now I can only deal with you myself." Duan Yu couldn't resist ridiculing in Xingho. How could the late emperor help you deal with the crown princess? That would be strange. Could the hand of the former emperor reach to the divine land to stir up trouble? Just for Xiangchang, Zhangzhou had to go to war with Shenzhou. Only your daughter's life was important, but what about the thousands of ordinary people suffering from the war? Forget it, I can't be bothered to ridicule him. I don't have long to live anyway. And Xingho repeatedly talked about the interceptions on the way back to Zhangzhou. Finally, the little crown princess's broken string was connected. She frowned and looked him up and down, the alchemist from the Royal Academy. The young crown princess's eyes grew cold as she said, "When Feng Mulan was training, he summoned the three-colored spirit magpies to attack us as soon as he recovered his spiritual power. He injured the little fatty and tried to take my life." Anqing Marquis said angrily, "My daughter has already paid the price for her willful actions. Hadn't she already been expelled from the academy? Why do you still refuse to let her go? What's wrong with me getting rid of those who have evil intentions towards me? If I let her go, who will let me go? Are you sure she won't go back and complain to you? Won't she cry and beg you for help? Will she turn over a new leaf and not cause trouble for me?" The little stoic asked coldly. "I originally didn't have any enmity with her, but she was muddle-headed and insisted on causing trouble for me everywhere. She didn't have the ability and was dealt with by me, yet you come to cry injustice. Indeed, she has you, her father, standing up for her. You can tolerate her, love her, and indulge her in whatever she does." Chapter 50:13. My arbor doesn't have a father that I can rely on. My father is only an ordinary cultivator. Normally, he would never teach me to stir up trouble for no reason or scheme against anyone I don't like. My father isn't as resourceful as you, Lord Marquis. To be able to do as you please in a place like Azure Palace's inner court and meticulously plan and arrange such a big play. I was bullied for no reason, so I shouldn't cry out for injustice. I should accept it, I shouldn't retaliate, I deserve to be unlucky, right? Once I retaliated, all of you said that I retaliated too much, that I didn't handle it well, that I'm vicious, scheming, and filled with evil intentions. Yes, I'm a vile person who seeks revenge for the smallest grievance. Nonsense. Duan Yu was furious and couldn't resist tugging at her while shaking his head in disapproval. No need to waste words with this person. He's standing on his side and protecting the person he wants to protect, so he naturally feels that you're wrong and an eyesore. Marquis and Xingho. Duan Yu coldly looked at the thin man below the steps. That day, when we were training in Phoenix Grove, our cultivation and divine senses were temporarily blocked, so we needed to rely on pills to recover. Do you know what the first thing Xiang Chang did when she recovered her strength was? She killed Jojo and her companions. There wasn't any blood feud in the first place. Xiang Chang wanted to kill her own schoolmate because of some trivial matters, completely disregarding the Academy's friendship. Is there a problem with the Academy expelling her? This matter was caused by her own actions, so shouldn't she bear the consequences herself? Marquis and Xingho's face twitched, and he opened his mouth to refute when Xiao Kezi announced loudly from outside, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager has arrived. Duan Yu's brows involuntarily knitted together. This fake Empress Dowager Nei Wang had been well-behaved ever since she ascended the throne and never stirred up any trouble. Her Wang family had long died out, and she didn't have any power behind her. She was also very clear that if she wanted to continue this prosperous and peaceful life, she had to build a good relationship with the Emperor. Relying on His Majesty to live was her best choice right now. Wang Shi ordered people to escort in a middle-aged eunuch with disheveled hair and covered in blood. When he saw the Emperor, he hurriedly said, Your Majesty, Aijia's people found this shifty-eyed eunuch in the backyard and wanted to escape. After asking, I found out that something big had happened to you. So, he quickly sent someone to escort him over. At the same time, the three little palace maids who were kneeling at the bottom of the steps saw the eunuch who was beaten beyond recognition. They were so scared that they didn't dare to look closely. Still not kneeling. A strong old mama stepped forward and kicked the eunuch's knees, causing him to kneel on the ground with a thud. Duan Yu looked meaningfully at this fake Empress Dowager. Although the fake Empress Dowager had not been in the palace for a long time, she was a smart person. She received the news so quickly and quickly found Eunuch Yang and brought him here. Not only could she quickly distance herself from him, but she could also put on a righteous front. It was a pretty good calculation. Speak, did you accept Marquis and Xingho's bribe and instigate the three palace maids to lure the crown princess to the imperial garden? Xiao Kezi immediately berated Eunuch Yang after Duan Yu signaled with his eyes. That Eunuch Yang couldn't help but tremble as he looked pleadingly at an elderly man kneeling behind Marquis and Xingho. It was I who asked Eunuch Yang for help, the elderly man said calmly with an indifferent expression. Chapter 50-14. Duan Yu was puzzled. You guys were able to set up an invisible gravity talisman matrix in the Imperial Garden. Not only that, but they also hollowed out the ground, buried sharp blades, and smeared lethal poison on them. As long as someone fell in, they would have a slim chance of survival. Since when did the head eunuch of Benevolence Palace have such great power? These things couldn't have been done in a day or two in the Imperial Garden. When the fake Empress Dowager saw the Emperor's puzzled gaze sweep over, she knew that he was still doubting her. She quickly smiled calmly and said, Your Majesty may not know, but although this Eunuch Yang is only a level 10 mystic cultivator, he has a contracted mystic beast, a groundhog. It can dig holes abnormally fast, and it doesn't even take an hour to dig a large hole in ordinary soft ground. When she said this, Eunuch Yang immediately collapsed to the ground like a deflated ball. The elderly man's earlier words actually completely confirmed that he had accepted a bribe and had selfishly helped outsiders dig holes in the Imperial Garden. The fake Empress Dowager's words were merely an additional explanation. Lord Marquis, I helped you so sincerely, but you actually, Eunuch Yang truly wanted to cry but had no tears. He didn't expect that the Marquis and his personal guards would bite him to death when things came to a head. Your Majesty, please spare my life. Eunuch Yang sprawled on the ground with tears streaming down his face as he wailed sorrowfully. This servant was momentarily blinded by greed and was blinded by greed. If it weren't for Lord Marquis tempting this servant with hundreds of millions of spirit coins, this servant wouldn't have. Marquis and Xingho is truly generous. Who would be able to resist being bribed with more than 100 million spirit coins? So, this matter made sense. Marquis and Xingho probably found the one surnamed Yang because he fancied that groundhog. It had a miraculous effect in digging holes and could coordinate with his own people to set up a formation. May I know this sir's name? You should be a fellow villager of Prince Nuo's two beloved concubines, right? Duan Yu's eyes coldly swept over the elderly man behind Marquis and Xingho. This elderly man's face was still stained with blood, but it had already congealed into patches of dark red. Sir is a transcendent god realm cultivator, so why pretend to have been beaten and abused? Are you waiting for an opportunity? When Duan Yu said this, the fake Empress Dowager, who was originally standing next to Xingho, couldn't help but jump in fright. She promptly made a decision to hide behind the royal guards, her reaction very quick-witted. At this moment, the silent elderly man who had been kneeling on the ground the whole time slowly raised his head, and his lightning-like gaze flitted past Duan Yu and Arbor. Ma Wu, kill them. The elderly man's figure abruptly dashed toward Xiao Mu, and his firm and powerful claw swiped at her shoulder. No wonder Xingho didn't panic at all from the beginning to the end. Duan Yu couldn't help but curl his lips mockingly. So it turned out that he had brought a Transcendence Realm expert with him. Bang! Duan Yu's palm collided with his opponent's, and the latter was pushed back 3 steps. The elderly man named Ma Wu glanced at Duan Yu in astonishment, and his figure suddenly split into 2. It was so fast that Duan Yu only had time to change his expression. This old man actually had a corporeal clone. He, Jojo, dodged quickly. Duan Yu blocked the old man's attack, but he didn't have the time to care about the other clone. Duan Yu watched as the old man smiled sinisterly and his hand was about to grab Arbor's neck. A streak of black fire poured down from the sky. Chapter 50-15. It was so fast that no one had time to react. With a loud boom, it hit the old man's clone. Old man Ma Wu probably did not expect such a variable to appear in the air. Caught off guard, he was hit in 1 hit. The clone retreated dozens of steps with a grunt. He retreated from the long, wide steps to the flat ground. The old man stomped on the ground. It took him a lot of effort to stabilize himself. He lifted his head and stared at the figure with a sharp gaze. A black figure tore open the space in front of him in an instant and stepped out. His phoenix-like eyes were filled with coldness. The man's face was covered in a layer of cold frost. He exuded an intimidating aura. The pressure coming at him made old man Ma Wu widen his eyes in shock. You! Ma Wu had only uttered 1 word when the other party did not give him a chance to speak. He raised his hand and shot out 5 balls of black fire. They went straight for his face. The speed was so fast that the old man could not react in time. The 5 balls of black fire were already in front of him. Ma Wu took a deep breath. He spread his hands and released a burst of saint power. The whirlpool-like power was like a tornado that swept away the clouds, blowing in all directions. The 5 balls of black fire were not affected at all. They were not blown away by him at all. Instead, they landed on his body. The black flames burned on Ma Wu's body in a low-key yet luxurious manner. Ma Wu froze. He quickly brushed his outer robe aside and threw it on the ground. At the same time, the 5 balls of black fire burned his outer robe to ashes. What are you? Ma Wu clenched his fists and was about to question him when he suddenly felt a burning sensation in his chest. When he lowered his head to take a look, his expression immediately changed and he couldn't help but shudder. He did not know when a ball of black fire had started burning on his chest. It had burned the front of his robe. The black fire danced on his pale skin. The black light flickered faintly. Old man Ma Wu was dumbfounded. Didn't he just activate the saint energy in his body and completely separate the 5 balls of black fire? Why was it would still be the same? The black flames were burning his skin and slowly spreading across his body in an unbridled manner. This was his materialized avatar. Seeing that it was about to be roasted into pieces by the black fire, Ma Wu naturally could not watch as his avatar was destroyed. Just as he was about to pounce, a light green vine shot out from the side and landed on his shoulder with a thud. A moon-white figure flashed and suddenly appeared beside him. A cold light flashed through her smiling eyes. What? You want to win with numbers? From beginning to end, Arbor, who hadn't moved an inch, was now staring unblinkingly at the 2 people at the bottom of the stairs. Now he glanced at him, then at the other. She looked at this and that, and after a while, she suddenly pinched Duan Yu's arm. What did you see? Duan Yu twitched his mouth in bewilderment. He coughed lightly and said, You didn't see wrong. Mo Lien and Rotten Peach Blossom came out of the sacrificial sea abyss. Not only did these 2 people come out, but they were also very lively. It could be seen that they scared the Transcendent Realm elderly into a corner as soon as they came out. Arbor's small, expressionless face was taut as he stared at the 2 people below with his pitch-black eyes. The little emperor looked down at the 2 people with pursed lips and did not make a sound. Chapter 50:16. Duan Yu couldn't resist glancing at her and grumbling in his mind, how strange. Why doesn't Jojo have any reaction at all? Arbor suddenly turned her head and extended a small paw to smack his hand. You're still in a dream. No need to lie to me. Duan Yu, accept reality, Jojo. Those 2 swindlers have returned. On the other side, Mo Lien, who was using the black fire to entangle the old man's clone, turned her head and saw that the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had already taken control of the old man's main body, so she ignored that Ma Wu. He quickly looked up at his expressionless wifey. His expression immediately turned bewildered with this look. Why did his wifey turn around and leave? At this time, the little stoic had already turned around, leaving him with the back of her head. Mo Lien hastily chased after her. When she passed by Duan Yu, she turned her head to glare fiercely at this guy. Duan Yu was baffled. What did I do? Why did Mo Lien glare at me just now? Is Mo Lien crazy? Jojo ignored him, so why did he glare at me? Serves you right for Jojo ignoring you for 100 years. Who told you to dawdle, to be stupid, to be silly, to be stupid? You only have yourself to blame. Mo Lien hastily dashed to Arbor's side and hastily grabbed her sleeve. Wifey. Jojo. Xiao Mu was pulled around by him, and her pair of pitch-black almond-shaped eyes stared fixedly at him like this. She didn't move at all for a while. Jojo. Arbor suddenly extended a small fist and smacked Mo Lien's chin with a bang. Duan Yu was shocked and took pleasure in her misfortune. Good hit. Ma Yichen was stunned and beamed with joy. Ha 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 ha. Mo Lien actually got beaten up one day. It simply couldn't get any better. The little fellow suddenly pounced on him, pouncing on his body. Her little hand pinched his face a few times as she muttered, Heh, you still want to turn into a nightmare to deceive people. See if I don't beat you to death. It felt real to the touch. It felt like skin to the touch. In addition, her husband's indescribable face was so close to her that it felt too real. Don't try to lie to me. Arbor kicked him a few times. Over the past few days, there had been a lot of nightmares trying to grab her. In her dreams, they kept screaming at her. Sometimes, they even pretended to be Mo Lien's death to scare her. They made use of every opportunity during the day and night. Even if she sat there in a daze for a while, it was very likely that she would be tortured. It was simply abominable. Did he think Jojo was an idiot? Kill this nightmare impersonator who pretended to be Lotus. Dong dong, dong dong, dong. Mo Lien was first hit on the chin, followed by 2 kicks to his body. At this moment, the little fellow's fists were like raindrops, repeatedly punching him back and forth. Mo Lien's heart instantly sank. He quickly reached out and hugged her tightly. He put on an expression that said, "Wife, go ahead and hit me. This husband can take it." He stared at her pitifully and said, "Wife, stop when you're satisfied. My hands will hurt." Arbor was stunned. He stopped and looked at him. Suddenly, he pinched his chin. Mo Lien hissed and looked at his wife pitifully. "My chin is going to swell, Jojo." Arbor kicked him. This nightmare impersonator can even talk. Ha! Mo Lien, Jojo, it's your husband. Open your eyes and look carefully. Look at your husband. He can run, jump, and kiss. What kind of nightmare impersonator can be so smart? Dong! Sir Jojo's fist landed on someone's head. Mo Lien's mouth twitched inwardly, and he felt like weeping but had no tears. Chapter 50:17. It's real. It's not a nightmare. It's a real person, Jojo. You beat me up for a long time just now. Don't you realize the difference between a nightmare and me? I'm alive and well. Do you think I'll let you off just because you're so handsome and act cute? Sir Jojo looked at him expressionlessly and did not speak for a long time. Mo Lien panicked. She turned to look at He Shichin, who was floating over quickly. She pointed at him and said, "Look, the rotten peach blossom is here." "You're right." We both jumped out of the abyss of the sacrificial sea unscathed. "Jojo, look, look. My husband is fine. The rotten peach blossom is also very good." As she spoke, the venerable peach blossom immortal floated over with a smile. He glanced at Mo Lien, who was acting cute and spinning in circles. Did she need to act cute to coax Jojo? Jojo hated cute things. The more she acted this way, the more counterproductive it would be. "Look at him." He leaned forward and said with a grin, "Jojo, long time no see. Did you miss me?" Boom. Lady Jojo unhesitatingly gave him a punch, which landed squarely on his face. The latter's handsome face was instantly filled with confusion. "Ha! I'm peerless and unparalleled. How did I get beaten up before my good looks could be used? Strange. Wasn't he supposed to beat up Mo Lien? Why did he get implicated? This was not right. It wasn't easy for them to reunite. Shouldn't Xiao Xiao be pitifully leaning over and crying to them? This. What kind of trick was this?" Sir Jojo expressionlessly pulled out a pitch-black ferrule from his sleeve. Mo Lien's eyelids twitched. She hurriedly grabbed his wrist. "Jojo, your husband is here." Who are you hitting?" "You're lying to Jojo." Arbor shouted angrily and swung his ferrule at the venerable peach blossom immortal. Jojo's hand hurt from the beating just now. Suddenly, he remembered that he should use a ruler to beat people. It wouldn't hurt his hand, and it would make him feel more comfortable. The venerable peach blossom immortal's mouth twitched, and he hopped toward Duanyu in a panic. He kept shouting, "Jojo, that was merely a stopgap measure. I didn't intend to trick you into abandoning you." Arbor swung his ferrule at him. The pitiful venerable peach blossom immortal could only raise his paw and accept the blow obediently. Then, he shouted, "Ouch, ouch, ouch." She tricked Jojo into going down with her, but in the end, she abandoned Jojo halfway. Throw Jojo up there and use the barrier to block the way. Every single one of these things was their doing. Stinky liar. The venerable peach blossom immortal dashed to Duanyu's side in a panic and hastily shoved Duanyu in front of Arbor. "If I could do it all over again, would still do the same. Your safety is the most important, so I can't abandon you." Compared to Mo Lien, what is Mo Lien? At this critical juncture of life and death, I must prioritize saving you. Mo Lien glared at him and retorted without a second thought. "Then why did you generously sacrifice yourself for a cause at the bottom of the abyss of the sacrificial sea? Why did you have to die for us? You even died for him." Sir Jojo roared angrily. Duanyu's mouth twitched. "Can't you two stop courting death? At this critical juncture, would it kill you to go along with her and say a few soft words as expected?" Sir Jojo was enraged and swung his ferrule at the two of them. Poor Duanyu was merely trying to stop the fight, but he ended up getting beaten up more than the venerable peach blossom immortal. There was simply no one else like him. If Sir Jojo attacked in anger, would you be scared? Chapter 50-18. The three of them instantly felt a bit desolate, especially when Ma Shichen and Mo Lien looked at each other, feeling like they had courted death. If they hadn't foolishly spilled the beans just now, perhaps Jojo wouldn't have gotten so angry. Now that Jojo already knew that the two of them had encountered a life and death crisis in the abyss of the sacrificial sea, they probably had to confess honestly. Duanyu wanted to cry. He was too baffled. After being scammed by these two frauds, Jojo was now beating up anyone he saw, including him. Retaliate? That was impossible even in their next life. If they didn't retaliate, the little fellow was quite ruthless. If they dodged quickly, they would even incur the little stoic's furious glare, accusing them of dodging. "You, hurry up and say something." The venerable peach blossom immortal was just short of directly telling Mo Lien, "Bro, why are you being so reserved? Hurry and kneel down to beg for mercy, and we won't laugh at you. If Jojo says you're wrong, then you're naturally wrong. Hurry and admit your mistake, admit your mistake." Arbor suddenly paused and expressionlessly rubbed her stomach. When Duanyu saw this, he quickly asked, "Did you use too much force earlier and your stomach hurts?" Arbor shook her head and coldly said, "Baby Mo said that when he comes out, he'll beat you guys up for me. He told me not to do it now because it's too tiring." Everyone looked at him in bewilderment. No, Baby Mo, who is it?" The venerable peach blossom immortal secretly winked at Mo Lien. Shit, judging from Jojo's tone, she was quite familiar with this Baby Mo. Why did another weirdo appear by her side after not seeing her for more than a month? Mo Lien quickly walked up and grabbed Arbor's small hand. "Jojo, Baby Mo." Mo Lien's gaze followed her small hand down and landed on her stomach. Suddenly, a light bulb lit up in his mind, and he became excited. He grasped Xiao Mu's hand tightly in his palm as his gaze swept back and forth across her stomach. "Chow, is this Baby Mo, is it? Our children?" Arbor remained calm and asked with a straight face, "What do you think?" I am naturally overjoyed, chow. In his excitement, Mo Lien actually stuttered, chow, I'm really going to be a dad." Arbor was still expressionless as he said stiffly, indeed. The corners of the venerable peach blossom immortal's mouth twitched. She felt that the conversation between the couple was so serious that it was a little funny. Happiness came too suddenly. Prince Mo beamed with joy. Just as he was about to reach out and pick up his wife, he saw the little fellow slap the back of his hand. She said coldly, "You and I haven't reconciled yet. Don't come over and hug me." Mo Lien, everyone says that husband and wife fight at the head of the bed and reconcile at the end of the bed. Yet I insist on letting you know. The little stoic said solemnly, "Me and you, the two of us. If you fight at the head of the bed, you won't be able to reconcile at the end of the bed." Mo Lien, I suddenly have a bleak feeling that I might have to sleep in the living room for several nights. Pfft, the venerable peach blossom immortal turned his back and couldn't resist bursting into laughter. Fuck, as expected, he still liked to stay with the little stoic. There was always something to laugh at and joy at every moment. Even if he just looked at her like this, he was still very happy. He watched as his wifey suddenly turned and left after saying this, leaving the three people with the back of her head. Mo Lien couldn't resist reaching out and called out aggrievedly, "Wifey, don't go. Can't this husband accept his punishment?" Chapter 50-19. Jojo. Mo Lien hastily leaped up and swiftly flashed to his wife's side. However, he saw that the little stoic had already stopped and turned back to meet his eyes. Humph. Xiao Mu harshly harumphed at him before trotting past him in a trot. Strange, why did she want to run away? The one who should run away, be guilty, reflect, and apologize was Mo Lien. It was the rotten peach blossoms, it was the two of them. Sir Jojo shouldn't run away. The little stoic stomped down the steps with a cold and solemn expression. Ma Wu, who had coincidentally fallen to the ground, was already struggling to crawl halfway up. Just as he opened his mouth to say, "You," the little stoic effortlessly stepped on his head. The little stoic treated him as a stepping stone and stepped over him without even looking at him. She walked to Enchanting, who had collapsed on the ground. "You're called Enchanting," the little crown princess asked coldly. Everyone couldn't help exasperatedly looking at each other. Enchanting was merely a title, right? How could his name be called Enchanting? However, forget it, whatever the little stoic said was the truth. Why didn't you answer when I asked you a question? The little crown princess impatiently circled Enchanting and paused to look down at him. Enchanting snorted and collapsed on the ground dejectedly. Suddenly, he laughed loudly. This old man overestimated himself. He didn't expect that the Transcendence Realm elderly Ma Wu would have no chance of victory in front of His Majesty. No, if those two hadn't suddenly arrived, perhaps Ma Wu and His Majesty would still have a chance. But now, the situation was hopeless. Enchanting closed his eyes, completely unable to see any hope. He could only bury his daughter's grudge like this. He was unwilling, indignant, and resentful. The little stoic said, "Hey," and looked down at Enchanting's fluctuating expression. She impatiently said, "Didn't you want to avenge your daughter?" "I'll give you a chance to avenge your daughter," Arbor said dryly. She didn't think that she was wrong to give the order to kill Xiang Chang. After all, if someone offended her, she had to fight back. The other party's skills were not as good as hers, so he could only admit that he was unlucky. But looking at Enchanting's tearful appearance, he felt that he couldn't erase his old father's sincerity. Thus, he said, "How about this, I'll have a fair fight with you. Life and death are up to fate. What do you think?" Ma Wu moved his body and stumbled forward a few steps. Before he could get close to the little stoic, he was swatted away by Zhi Qin, who suddenly flashed in front of him. The old man had been suppressing a mouthful of blood for a long time. At this moment, he could not help but spit it out. Little girl, you're going too far. She clearly knew that with so many helpers around her, it was impossible to achieve a fair competition. As long as she was injured in the slightest, would the three people in front of them let them go? Anger flashed through Ma Wu's eyes. The Marquis's cultivation is not high. Naturally, he is no match for the Crown Princess. Crown Princess, if you want to compete, there is no harm in competing with this old man. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist snickering. What are you saying? You're a transcending divinity realm who concealed your presence and hid in Sangzhou. You still have the face to ask to compete with Jojo. You're a damn old man who lived for over 100 years, yet you still have the nerve to ask. Do you think you'll gain face by winning by picking a little girl to compete with? Mo Lian felt that as her husband, it was time for him to work hard to perform. Chapter 50-20. Therefore, he hurriedly floated to his wife's side and smiled fawningly at her. Wife, your husband will beat him for you. Your husband will definitely beat this old man in front of you into a pig's head. Ma Wu stood with his hands behind his back in a huff. Flames of anger danced in his old, dim eyes. Marquis and Xingho is my benefactor. I am willing to give up my life for the Marquis. If you insist on interfering, then this old man has nothing to say about the grudges between others. Mo Lian laughed in anger when she heard this. Others? Grudges between others? Old man, not only is your brain not good, there is something wrong with your eyes. This is my wife. I took over my wife's business and helped my wife beat people up. How did it become someone else's business? Your brain is not clear. I don't want to waste my breath on you. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was speechless. Mo Lian's words seemed to make sense, but in Xingho and Ma Wu's disdainful gazes felt as if they were looking at an idiot. What a sanctimonious person repaying a debt of gratitude. Arbor sneered coldly as his gaze swept across their faces. Ma Wu frowned and covered his chest with one hand. What? To put it bluntly, isn't this matter caused by you, the Crown Princess? If you were magnanimous enough and not so vicious, you would not have sent people to kill Princess Xiangqiang on her way back to Zhangzhou and let her die an unnatural death. If the princess had not died, the Marquis would not have come to find trouble with you, and I would not have made you my enemy. Arbor could not help but laugh. They seemed to have all the logic in the world. This Mr. Ma Wu. You guys truly have double standards. Xiao Mu coldly curled her lips at the two people. When you accuse others of being vicious, why don't you think about yourself? When you were killing people in the Imperial Garden, did you think about sparing the lives of those two concubines? No. You bribed the two concubines and gave them some money and assets in exchange for their lives. You planned to kill both them and me in the gravity restraint rune array since the very beginning. You didn't intend to let any of the innocent people here go, and now you're telling me that you're vicious. Tell me, one must be broad-minded when dealing with matters. Arbor sneered. It turns out that the words broad-minded have been used to demand others from the beginning to the end. Us. Ma Wu was at a loss for words. Indeed, there was no way to refute it, because it was the truth. When they attacked, they didn't intend to let anyone live. The old man hurriedly glanced at his master, and Xingho. At this time, and Xingho was sitting on the ground, as if all his bones and strength had been sucked out. He couldn't see any hope in front of him. He had lost. He had lost everything from head to toe. Whether it was a plot or an assassination, he had tried both, but he was no match for the little crown princess in front of him. It seemed that the little crown princess in front of him was not an existence that could be defeated by a few people he randomly assigned. Marquis. Ma Wu saw that he was in a daze and hurriedly called out to him. Old and Xingho came back to his senses, and a trace of coldness hung on his hazy face. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, a series of strange laughter rolled out from his throat. He sat on the ground in a daze and did not move at all. Chapter 50-21. What are you laughing at? The atmosphere in the main hall was not pleasant. When Arbor saw Xingho, that old geezer, sitting motionlessly on the ground and playing dead after his challenge, he became even more displeased. Was he going to fight or not? Why was he just sitting there and laughing like an idiot? Arbor was about to roar at Xingho when he heard the clanging of weapons from outside the hall. Mo Lian frowned and seemed to have recalled something. She quickly turned to Duan Yu and said, "Tell your men to stop. There are 4 servants outside that I took in from the abyss of the sacrificial sea. There's also a human snake and Chichuan from the Shen residence. Tell them to stop fighting." If it weren't for the sudden sounds of fighting, Mo Lian might have already thrown Shenwu and the others to the back of her mind and completely forgotten about them. It couldn't be helped. Ever since he saw his wife for the first time, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Right now, there was only his daughter-in-law in his eyes, heart, and mind. At this moment, his small eyes kept glancing at his wife's small belly. His heart was filled with joy, apprehension, anticipation, and melancholy. All kinds of emotions came one after another. That gaze was so intense that it was impossible for Lord Qiao Qiao to ignore him. Humph. Sir Jojo proudly turned his head away. Mo Lian quickly shuffled up and stealthily moved to his wife's side. He tugged at her sleeve. "Jojo, hubby missed you so much. These days and nights, hubby has been thinking about you and worrying about you. I didn't have any appetite for food or drink. My heart is especially miserable." Arbor harumphed with a stiff expression on his face, resolutely refusing to give him any response. The little crown princess pursed her lips, and her gaze shifted to the entrance. She saw the first person to enter, dragging a 2-meter-long snake tail behind him as he slithered across the floor. The little crown princess was startled, and her eyes abruptly widened. Wasn't this that berserk sage beastman snake? Why was he tailing Jojo's Lian the entire time? From the looks of it, this group of people seemed to be very familiar with each other. Where was the appearance of those who fought with their lives on the line? Qiao Mu was puzzled as she looked at the human snake in bewilderment. She remembered this stinky snake all too well. Back then, at the entrance of the sacrificial sea, he had fought with it. It was a huge battle, and the berserk saint beast was almost invincible. Zuolanshan's gaze couldn't help but shrink. He didn't know why, but when he saw the little girl's gaze sweep over, he only felt his tail stiffen. The scales on his tail that had been cut by the Fushi greatsword previously seemed to be reflexively hurting at this moment. Zuolanshan instinctively hid behind Mo Lian and muttered softly, "Take care of your wife. Look, isn't she glaring at me?" This little girl's eyes were sharp and she was not an ordinary person. Zuolanshan would never admit defeat. He felt that he could not meet the little girl's sharp eyes. With the pressure that he imperceptibly released, it was impossible for it to not affect the stoic-faced little girl in front of him in the slightest. Zuolanshan's eyes flickered, and he nodded slightly at the little stoic from a distance. Truly, one can wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort. "We meet again, little girl." Originally, he wanted to say, "What a coincidence, little girl. It's a small world, and we meet again." However, the words that came out of his mouth were completely wrong. The little stoic even took out 100 attack talismans without another word and directly threw them at him. Chapter 50-22. Zuolanshan was a bit stupefied, and his slight smile froze on his face. No, that wasn't it. Fuck, was the little stoic sick? He greeted her with a smile. He had already expressed such friendly intentions to her, so why the heck did she attack him? Was there still justice in this world? Where did justice exist? Where was justice? Zhuolan hurriedly sent Mo Lian a pleading look for help. The latter couldn't resist covering her face with her hand and twitching her mouth. She had just called out Charles when the 100 or so attack talismans crashed towards Zhuolan without any regard for their lives, making whooshing noises. They formed a circle of talismans in front of Zhuolan and fluttered up and down. Stay your hand. This old man didn't come here today to fight with a junior like you. You're very good. I've already remembered you. Shen Wuke hastily went up to persuade him. Senior, you should speak less. Really, your words are exceptionally infuriating and grating on anyone's ears. Zhuolan originally wanted to curry favor with Charles and say that her cultivation was excellent at such a young age, but the moment he spoke, his tone changed. Arbor glowered at him and thought, you stinking snake, I haven't settled the score with you for last time's matter, yet you actually dare to remember me? You want to settle the score with me in the future, right? I'll kill you. Once the little stoic's vicious thoughts arose, the 100 or so attack talismans flying around the snake instantly cracked at the same time, and the power of the attack talismans surged out and rushed straight for his face. This was a sign that she was going to blow up the snake's head. Zhuolan expression darkened, and he repeatedly stomped his foot to summon Mo Lian. Mo punk, what's wrong with your wife? I've already said so many nice things, so why is she still hitting me? He didn't forget that this fellow used an ancient holy weapon at the entrance of the undersea abyss and almost severed his snake tail. Mo Lian glanced at him speechlessly. You said a string of nice things. Are you kidding me? Crown Prince Mo stealthily rolled his eyes and very consciously moved to the side to give way. If his wife wanted to beat up a human snake, then he had to let her beat him to her heart's content. At the crucial moment, he had to make a move. Helping his wife beat up the human snake until even his parents couldn't recognize him was a perfectly justified action. Brad Mo, why don't you say it Io? The snake man shouted, you, Io. He hastily put on a godly armor helmet and glared at the little stoic in exasperation through the layer of godly armor. Arbor waved his hand and summoned a thunder flash. He clenched his fists and was about to leap forward. Snake Man hastily shouted, facial paralysis. We are on the same side, on the same side. At that time, the little stoic had already rushed in front of the human snake, and the thunderclap sword in her hand emitted wisps of lightning. Wearing his helmet, Snake Rider shrank his neck and hurriedly shouted, Stop. I admit my mistake. The little stoic's thunderclap sword was held horizontally above his head. She glanced at him blankly and stopped her slashing motion with an odd expression. What did you say? Snake Man coughed and shouted irritably, this old man admits his mistake. I regret that I was tricked into going berserk. Now, we're considered on the same side, so don't hit this old man again. Sir Jojo was puzzled. He didn't put away his thunderclap sword, but his eyes glanced in the direction of his husband and rotten peach blossom. What was going on? Was this coward before him still the sacred beast that displayed invincible might and swept away all the members of the dragon clan with a flick of its tail? Chapter 50-23. Arbor put away the thunderclap sword and silently glanced at the human snake. She called out in confusion and asked crisply, What's your name? Zhuolan reflexively replied, Zhuolan. After saying that, he couldn't resist glaring at the little lady. He was actually unable to resist the little stoic shout. GC. Shenwu Zhou Datong. Several feeble voices immediately popped up one after another. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't help but cover his face with his hands. Qiao Qiao's roar had intimidated the others and they all reported their names together. Speaking of which, this was truly hilarious. When Arbor heard those feeble cries, she turned to look in Shenwu's direction. GC, Old Zhou, and the other three were very tactful and quickly jogged forward to respectfully salute Arbor. Greetings, mistress. Arbor peeked at Mo Lien. Mo Lien quickly leaned over with a joyful expression. Jojo, these are hubby's new subordinates. Arbor glanced at him with mixed feelings before turning to leave. She clasped her hands behind her back, pursed her lips, and trotted away. Mo Lien turned to look dumbfoundedly at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was rejoicing in her misfortune. Rotten Peach Blossom, what's wrong with Jojo? Isn't it obvious? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal didn't conceal his sympathy and disdain. Jojo doesn't want to talk to you, and Jojo doesn't like you. Jojo is angry at you. When he said the last sentence, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal even guffawed loudly. That gloating expression made Mo Lien's fists itch. On the other side, Duan Yu quietly instructed the personal guards to handcuff the limp and Xingho and Ma Wu with special shackles before transferring them to the dungeon. After he finished speaking, Duan Yu turned around and looked at Mo Lien seriously. Come out. Prince Mo strolled over with a puzzled expression. Before he could speak, he heard the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal calling out from behind them, Shua Duan Yue, don't leave yet. Have someone bring 2 pots of good wine over. I'm a little hungry. Quick, treat us well. Duan Yu walked out of the hall and stood still. Mo Lien followed him out and whispered, if you have anything to say, you can't say it inside. Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly saw Duan Yu turn around and pull out a 3-foot-long sword, stabbing it at Prince Mo without a second word. With a flash of silver light, the crown prince moved quickly and leaped onto the roof. Duan Yu pursed his lips and remained silent. With a flick of his sleeves, he leaped onto the eaves and attacked Mo Lien with the sword in his hand with increasing ferocity. Clang, clang, clang. The long swords clanged and clanged. This sound immediately attracted the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal from inside the hall. When he looked up and saw this scene of swords clashing, his jaw nearly dropped. He hastily followed behind and shouted as he ran, Hey, you two, I told you to get wine. Why did you start fighting? Although the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal didn't understand the situation, he could see that although their attacks were fierce, they didn't show any killing intent. Clearly, they were just playing around with each other. Therefore, he wasn't particularly nervous and merely followed the 2 people flying back and forth on the roof. He ran and ran all the way into another court. Through the long lattice window in the bedchamber, he saw the little stoic lying against the window. She had wrapped herself up like a small cocoon and was expressionlessly sleeping soundly. Chapter 50-24. The 2 of them flew back and forth on the eaves outside the hall and fought for nearly 4 hours. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was about to doze off from boredom and could only sit aggrievedly under the little stoic's window. He couldn't resist rolling his eyes as he watched the 2 of them fight. He would occasionally call out, stop fighting, but he knew that the 2 of them wouldn't hear him at all. What was going on with these 2 fellows? They had just met, yet they were already fighting. Finicky, annoying, mentally ill. How did Jojo fall in love with this kind of Mo Lien? He really couldn't figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. She didn't seem to be any better. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at the 2 of them on the roof and couldn't resist rolling his eyes while propping up his chin. Stop acting. Jojo fell asleep long ago and can't see. The 2 of them exchanged several hundred moves before swiftly flying to another eve. Soon after, they stopped and silently looked at each other. You slashed me 8,972 times with your sword just now. Shameless. You didn't lose out either. Duan Yu expressionlessly said, you attacked 9,103 times, and your attack speed far surpasses mine. Ha! Mo Lien directly threw Raven Moon in his hand onto the eaves, allowing it to dangle unsteadily between the cracks between the tiles. On the other side, Duan Yu also did the same and threw his sword. The two of them rested for less than a minute before simultaneously flying forward and punching each other with their fists. You. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist jumping up and widening his beautiful eyes as he muttered to himself, can you two be a bit more mature? They fought from sunset until the dead of the night. I'm freaking so hungry. Most importantly, he simply didn't know why these two lunatics were fighting each other to vent their frustrations. Taking a deep breath, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal tried his best to put on a perfect smile. He raised his voice and roared at the two of them, you two idiots, stop. When Arbor woke up, she was a bit dazed. She flipped over and thought for a few seconds, and a hint of panic gradually appeared on her face. She hastily got off the bed and stomped on her shoes in a flurry. With her head full of disheveled hair, she was about to run toward the door. The door to the hall creaked as someone suddenly pushed open a crack from the outside. Mo Lien's face, accompanied by a faint ray of morning light, suddenly entered her sight. The little stoic's eyes abruptly brightened. It seemed like she wasn't dreaming yesterday. Mo Lien and Rotten Peach really did return. When she woke up just now, her mind couldn't quite wrap itself around it. She thought that she had been dreaming in a daze last night, and she was even flustered about whether the Mo Lien she saw last night was real or an illusion. I won't go anywhere in the future and will stay with wifey. The little stoic expressionlessly looked at him, her pitch-black eyes staring fixedly at him for a long while. Slap. Prince Mo twitched his mouth. He felt that his wifey's slap was quite painful, and he looked down at his pitiful hand. Sir Jojo harumphed, don't think that you can reconcile with me just by acting cute. She dug around in her sleeves and suddenly pulled out a handmade booklet. She slapped it on Mo Lien's hand. Copy. Mo Lien's mouth twitched. I came back too late from working overtime today. I'm sleepy, so I'll sleep first. I'll wake up tomorrow morning to catch up on 2 chapters. Chapter 50-25. At this time, the little stoic had already put on her coat and expressionlessly went to wash up. She left behind her husband, who was dazedly holding a handwritten manuscript with an inexplicably disheveled expression. He stood by the bed and glanced aggrievedly at her departing figure. It was only after Arbor walked past him that she curled her lips, revealing a secret smile. Jojo's small stoic face almost couldn't remain taut earlier. If she laughed out loud in front of that guy now, he would definitely take advantage of her. He would definitely take advantage of every opportunity to make up and ask for hugs. Humph. Jojo wouldn't fall for his trick, and he definitely wouldn't be tricked by Jojo's lotus. While Arbor was washing up and wiping her face, she secretly peeked at Mo Lien. This guy was like a pitiful little thing as he walked to the table with the handwritten manuscript she gave him and also secretly peeked at her. The two of them just happened to meet each other's eyes while sneaking back and forth. Prince Mo's spirits immediately roused, and he burst into laughter. He quickly ran to her and said, "Wife, you were peeking at me." Arbor rolled his eyes at him. Misconception. No, there's no misconception. You were peeking at your husband just now. Go copy it. Sir Jojo grumpily roared at him. Oh. Prince Mo drooped his head listlessly and strode toward the table, but he couldn't stop turning back to glance at his wife. Jojo, can your husband copy it once? Once? Ha! In your dreams. Copy it 100 times. The little fellow gave the final word, not caring about her husband's bitter expression at all. Serves him right. Who asked him to lie to Jojo all day long? Who asked him to cheat his father all day long? This was the punishment he deserved. Prince Mo flipped open the first page of the handbook, and there were 5 large words on it, quotes from the little emperor. The Crown Prince, on the second page, there were only a few words, everything Jojo says must be obeyed. As the Crown Prince copied, he thought, I listen to everything my wife says. How can I not listen? The more he copied, the more Crown Prince Mo smiled faintly. What was written in the book? When there was a conflict between Jojo's wishes and his own, he had to listen to Jojo. What do you mean? Climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of fire. Bring your Jo with you wherever you go. He even said that if you ever leave Jojo behind again, you won't be able to speak to Jojo for 100 years. This is too cruel, Mo Lien thought to herself. How many 100 years can a person have? Not being able to talk to Jo for 100 years was such a sad thing. When the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal knocked on the door and entered, the miserable Crown Prince was only at the 58th copy. Sheets of white paper floated on the ground. Lines of words were written on them like floating clouds, and the strokes were like dragons and snakes. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was stunned. He did not know what was going on in this room. He bent down to pick up a piece of paper and looked at it. Immediately, he burst out laughing. Heavens, this scene, coupled with His Highness the Crown Prince's embarrassed handsome face, was so comical and hilarious. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shuffled through the door. He walked around the several sheets of white paper on the ground and walked to Arbor with a grin. Good morning, Jojo. Let Mo Lien copy here. Let's go eat breakfast. Prince Mo glared at him accusingly. You rotten peach blossom who hit me while I'm down. You actually dared to slander me in front of my wife and in front of me. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and suddenly made a move that Mo Lien found familiar. He pulled out a small booklet from his sleeve. He directly slapped it on the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's hands. The little stoic roared at him energetically, copy. Chapter 50-26. The background music instantly turned into Mo Lien's ha 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 laughter. Her gloating laughter nearly overturned the roof. What was this called? This was called being happy to see someone unlucky. In any case, she was already unlucky, so there was no harm in dragging someone down with her. Ha 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 ha. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glared at Mo Lien exasperatedly, only to hear the little stoic roar at him, copy it 100 times. She then abandoned the two and pattered out of the door, minding her own business to find breakfast. Lord Venerable Immortal's current mood was fuck, fuck, fuck. He didn't expect that when he ran over to call his Charles for breakfast, the heartless Charles would leave him here and copy it along with His Highness the Crown Prince. What the heck was this? Once Arbor walked out of the hall, she scanned her surroundings. She then waved at the two little royal maids who were passing by. What happened? Why was it that the surrounding vegetation seemed to have been flattened by someone overnight? Everywhere was a barren expanse. She remembered that there used to be a patch of small pomegranate flowers blooming here. The two little royal maids opened their mouths uneasily, but they didn't dare to speak casually. Instead, they looked at each other. Speak the truth. Replying Crown Princess, last night, His Majesty and the Crown Prince of the Divine Province had a big fight here. The little stoic was taken aback. She then responded with an "oh" and swiftly ended the topic. She waved at the two. "Lead the way." The two little royal maids, one of the rather quick-witted royal maids, immediately felt that the little crown princess probably wanted them to lead the way to find His Majesty. Right, she was just that quick-witted. Even though the crown princess was expressionless, the two of them inexplicably felt that His Majesty might be in trouble. When Arbor found Duan Yu under the two little royal maids' lead, Duan Yu was currently talking to the dispirited Prince of Dewa. Arbor only pretended not to see Prince of Dewa's bitter and unlucky appearance. She walked over on her own. Duan Yu's eyes involuntarily brightened when he saw her, and he said with a smile, "Jojo, there's breakfast." He noticed that Jojo paused in the middle of taking something out of his sleeve. He stopped talking involuntarily. Arbor stuffed the book back into his sleeve and glanced at Prince Kawa, who was looking at him with a bitter expression. "What else do you want?" "Crown Princess, about the compensation, can we discuss it again?" He was so worried that he couldn't sleep well that night. He got up early in the morning and went to Zhangzhou's emperor to cry and beg for mercy. She really hoped that what happened yesterday was just a dream. The little crown princess' 8-meter-long list had the intention of emptying the entire barbarian tribe. Sob, sob, sob. The little crown princess waved her small hand and shouted angrily at Chao Hua, "Let's talk about this later. You can leave now." Prince of Dewa was taken aback, but he quickly nodded and bowed. Yes, then this humble prince will take his leave first." The little stoic pursed her lips after shooing Chao Hua away. Duan Yu asked with a smile, "Why did you change your mind?" The little stoic ignored him and took out the little emperor's book of sayings from her sleeve, stuffing it into his hand. "Copy 30 times. As a precaution." Duan Yu looked at her in bewilderment, but the little stoic ignored him and ran off to enjoy the sumptuous breakfast that had already been placed there. Duan Yu flipped open the first page of the book. The little emperor's book of sayings. Chapter 50-27. Thankfully, Jojo was quick-witted. When she was writing the little emperor's quotations, she repeatedly copied 5 copies. In the future, whoever didn't listen to Jojo would copy it 1,800 times. Copying it until they were drunk and begging their grandparents. Arbor puffed up his cheeks and ate the pastries after eating the porridge. After eating the pastries, he scooped a bowl of porridge. Less than an hour later, the pitiful Prince Mo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal came over. When they saw the white paper spread out on the ground inside the pavilion, they both excitedly leaped forward. After glancing at the expressionless Duan Yu, they looked at each other and couldn't resist teasing, What is this? Ah, there are so many pieces of white paper on the ground. Could it be that Duan Yu was punished to copy? They each copied it 100 times. The little emperor, who was sitting upright and drinking tea, exposed the two when he heard this. "You still want to mock Duan Yu? You two are in the same boat, but each of you copied 70 times more than Duan Yu. Mock your sister." Prince Mo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal both showed bitter expressions. Duan Yu snorted and glanced at them. "Ha, I thought you two didn't copy. It turns out that you copied more than twice as much as me." The Crown Prince, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, twitched his mouth and coughed lightly before forcefully changing the topic. "Oh, right, we picked up a light coagulation mirror in the seabed abyss earlier." As he spoke, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal hastily sent Mo Lien a look. The latter immediately understood and reached out to summon a storage talisman, pulling out a bald-headed photon brain brat. The moment the light coagulation mirror Holy Spirit appeared, Arbor sensed his stomach heating up in response. Baby Mo had a reaction to the light coagulation mirror, so Arbor sensed it. At this time, the light coagulation mirror Holy Spirit also sensed it and turned around. After sizing up Arbor, its round eyes were stern as it declared righteously, "Woman. Lord Guangguang has never been one to be bewitched by lust. Don't use your beauty to try and tempt Lord Guangguang to contract with you." Bam! Just as it finished speaking, someone knocked its head. The light coagulation mirror Holy Spirit clutched its head in exasperation and turned around to glare at Mo Lien. "Insolent! A junior like you is being so rude to Lord Guangguang again." Mo Lien was too lazy to listen to his tone. She directly picked him up and brought the light congealing mirror Holy Spirit, whose two short legs were swaying left and right, to Arbor. "Jojo, wait a minute." Before Mo Lien could finish speaking, he was hastily interrupted by the light condensing mirror. "Hurry up and let Master Guang get off the ground." The light congealing mirror Holy Spirit hurriedly swung its legs and kicked in the air. The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched. She exchanged a glance with the expressionless Charles and loosened her grip, throwing the light congealing mirror Holy Spirit away. The sacred spirit of the light condensing mirror howled before pouncing over to hug Chow Chow's leg. It climbed up along the way and raised its small hand high up. Suddenly it pressed itself against Chow Chow's stomach. Arbor was expressionless. He lowered his head and glanced at the light congealing mirror Holy Spirit. "What are you doing?" This strange Holy Spirit was like a retard. With one hand pressed against her stomach, its eyes were shining with a strange light. It was as if it could see through her stomach that there was some kind of treasure inside. Its dog eyes were so bright that it almost made people unable to look at it. "Ha ha 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 ha." The sacred spirit of the light condensing mirror suddenly burst into laughter. It stroked Xiao Mu's stomach with its small hand as it muttered, "Truly, one can wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by sheer luck." The ears of the Saint Level Orc serpent who was walking along the path suddenly twitched. He thought to himself, "These words sound very familiar." Chapter 50-28. Arbor glanced expressionlessly at the light congealing mirror and raised her hand to pull it away from her, tossing it to the side and passing. The light congealing mirror's Holy Spirit scrambled up from the ground and jumped up and down, shouting, "How dare you! You're not allowed to be so rude to Sir Guangguang." Arbor narrowed her eyes at this fellow, sizing it up from head to toe. Yet she saw the light congealing mirror's Holy Spirit take out a small mirror and throw it at her without a second word. "What are you doing?" Mo Lien saw it clearly and furrowed her brows. She quickly raised her hand to stop it. However, the mirror condensed into a beam of light and rushed over with incomparable speed. Like a flowing light, it passed through his open 5 fingers in an instant. It entered the depths of Arbor's forehead with a whoosh. Arbor's body swayed, and she retreated 2 steps. Startled, Crown Prince Mo hastily dodged to the side to support her. "Jojo." Mo Lien grasped her hand and stared at her, asking repeatedly, "How is it? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Did this light congealing mirror barge into your conscious?" This abominable light congealing mirror actually dared to be so impudent and barged straight into the depths of Jojo's conscious. At this time, Duan Yu and Hichin also hastily flashed to Arbor's side. "How is it?" This light congealing mirror wasn't some mortal-grade mystic weapon. It was a sacred weapon passed down from ancient times. It wasn't man-made but a natural sacred weapon that had been polished over many years and soaked in time. Once this kind of sacred weapon entered the conscious to contract, it would definitely consume a lot of mental energy and divine consciousness. If something went wrong in a moment of carelessness, it would cause the conscious to shake and become unstable. The 3 of them nervously stared at Arbor, who raised her hand to support her head and shook it. The little stoic glanced at them blankly before shaking her head again and saying, it seems fine. Take a look at your conscious again." As soon as Mo Lien finished speaking, the other two hurriedly nodded in agreement. Arbor quickly used his inner vision, and his expression became even stranger. She glanced at the three of them and muttered, "I took a look. There doesn't seem to be that mirror in my conscious." "What?" Ma Shichen turned around and grabbed the kid who was kicking his legs and screaming. She snapped, "Tell me, what the hell did you do? You rushed into Jojo's conscious. Are you hiding and planning to secretly do something bad?" The light-condensing mirror Saint Spirit fumed, "Nonsense. What can Sir Guangguang do?" The little rascal pushed the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's hand away and paced back and forth in front of the four people for a while. He turned around and smiled with his hands behind his back. "Don't be nervous, woman. Lord Guangguang won't harm you." Arbor resisted the urge to beat this little devil up and said expressionlessly, "Why can't I find you when you enter my consciousness?" "Who said I entered your conscious?" The little devil proudly raised his chin, looking down on Arbor. "Woman, I won't contract with you. It's useless even if you beg your grandparents and beg Sir Guangguang 18,000 times. The child raised his chin and smiled smugly. "This lord already has a contractor now and is stronger than any of you. With this lord's support in the future, your path will naturally be smooth and bright." Sir Guangguang paused and suddenly laughed maniacally at the sky with his hands on his hips. "Can I hit him?" Xiao Mu tried to restrain herself, but in the end, she couldn't resist gritting her teeth and asking quietly. Chapter 50-29. This child looked especially deserving of a spanking. He was purely the type of person who absolutely wouldn't behave without a beating. The three heads next to him nodded several times in tacit agreement. The little stoic reached out and picked up that little imp. Her small hand landed on that child's butt and smacked it. So rude. Slap. Another smack. Children shouldn't make up nonsense when adults are asking questions. Also, if you're not a woman, you have to call me auntie. After being beaten 3 times, the little imp wailed loudly. Where was that high-spirited attitude of earlier when he was laughing with his hands on his hips? Right now, he was being held in Arbor's hand, and his small hands and feet kept swaying in the air. He wiped his tears and wailed, "Fierce woman. Bad woman. Just you wait, when my contractor comes, I'll definitely make you suffer until you're done." Mo Lien twitched her mouth and glanced sideways at the approaching holy beast man snake. She irritably mocked, "You're probably relatives, right?" They felt about the same in terms of cultural standards and choice of words. Zuolanshan, he inexplicably felt 10,000 points of damage, as well as Prince Mo's quiet disdain. What was going on? "Do you need me to help the little stoic beat up this light-condensing mirror?" Zuolanshan, who was doing his best to leave a favorable impression and sense of existence in front of the little stoic, asked. Sir Guangguang's desolate wails rippled around the gazebo. "You're all a bunch of bad people." He wailed pitifully, "You're all deranged, heartless, and inhumane, bullying Sir Guangguang. I'll definitely tell my contractor, wah, wah. Ba. Little benefactor, don't shed tears and wail. Your voice is especially ear-piercing and unpleasant. This humble monk's ears hurt." Everyone, Arbor couldn't help but twitch his eyes. He lowered his head and glanced at the baldy who pattered over to his side. Kong Kong and Guangguang, their names were different yet achieved the same result. Their baldy's appearance was also very similar. However, the little monk Kong Kong was slightly older than Sir Guangguang by 3 years, so he looked just like a little adult standing next to Sir Guangguang. Pooh! The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't help but be amused. He took the wailing Guangguang and said with a smile, "Hey, Guangguang, look. I didn't lie to you when I said that I would bring you to make a new friend, right? Look, he has the same bald head as you. Just like you, he likes to nag. In fact, he's even more nag than you. Aren't you very happy to be able to make such a good friend? Lord Guangguang had already stopped crying at this time, his watery eyes looking at little monk Kong Kong suspiciously. Nonsense. Lord Guangguang raised his hand to rub his little head and cried out in a childish voice, "This person is clearly a monk, how can he be the same as Lord Guangguang?" Lord Guangguang didn't shave his own head. He never had any hair. Since I was young, I have never had any hair. Since the beginning, not even a blade of grass can grow. As he muttered to himself, he kept rubbing his round little bald head. Everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter. All right, the two of you can go play somewhere else. Arbor raised his hand to rub his forehead and shook his head speechlessly. Female benefactor, who is this little benefactor? It's not a person, it's a mirror, Mo Lien said exasperatedly. It's a very noisy mirror. Kong Kong, bring this mirror back to the stellar domain and find a place for it to stay. Chapter 50-30. This mirror was strange. Why was it nowhere to be seen even though it had clearly charged into Jojo's conscious? She had to carefully observe this matter, Mo Lien inwardly mused. She might as well have the sapling Chocho escort that thing into the star domain and guard it closely. As long as this thing wanted to harm his Jojo, he wouldn't let it off even if it looked like a child. A cold glint flashed through Mo Lien's eyes. Arbor coughed lightly and said, "Don't be nervous, I feel nothing." This light-congealing mirror had indeed charged into her conscious earlier, but it had already disappeared without a trace when she was far away, as if it had never come or stayed there. It seemed that Sir Guangguang's words weren't completely unreliable. At the very least, its contractor should be someone else. Duan Yu couldn't help but have a strange expression. This is the first time I've seen a sacred spirit disdain Jojo. Arbor thought that wasn't the case. She was a phoenix egg, a bastard, who fought to contract with her. When had she ever been disdained by a sacred weapon like this? Just thinking about it was infuriating. The little stoic harumphed and haughtily muttered, "That's because it has extremely poor taste." Everyone hastily nodded and repeatedly criticized, "Right, extremely poor taste. This unlucky child. I'll beat it up every time I see it until it doesn't dare to speak carelessly." Arbor swept them a glance and did her best to keep her stoic face taut. She swiped her hand and took out a sparkling and translucent soul bead from her storage talisman. Ancient Mo Lien's half-wisp of soul suddenly turned into a soul bead for some reason that day. Arbor pushed the soul bead to Mo Lien and said seriously, "I wonder if it has anything to do with the danger you encountered." The soul bead was enveloped in an aqua-blue halo and emitted a faint luster. Ancient Mo Lien really did have half a wisp of soul wandering outside. He really didn't know about it. Now that he thought about it, no wonder he felt that the inheritance was a bit fragmented. It was probably missing this piece. In the past, he had inherited an incomplete legacy, so it was no wonder that cultivating it was more exhausting. If he were to absorb this soul orb in the future, he would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort in his cultivation. He wouldn't need to spend a large amount of energy to research the inheritance, and he wouldn't need to go into seclusion for long periods of time and separate from his wife. Mo Lien's eyes lit up and she nodded repeatedly. Just as her finger was about to touch the soul bead, suddenly, a furry face suddenly turned upside down and appeared between the two of them. It was actually a monkey hanging upside down from the treetop. While the two of them were stunned, they saw the monkey's hairy arms swing and snatch the soul bead suspended in the middle with an extremely fast technique. It opened its mouth and was about to suck the soul bead in. Mo Lien's eyes turned cold. She immediately moved to stop him. In the blink of an eye, Jojo's startled swan dagger flew towards the monkey and nailed one of its arms to the tree trunk. Originally, this monkey had wanted to escape after snatching the soul bead. Now that it was pinned to the tree, it naturally could not go anywhere. What's that sound? The saint snake suddenly raised its head to look. Eagles flew in from all directions, and some of the small animals hidden in the garden were also moving. Even the surrounding vegetation was growing wildly, and branches were entwining towards them. Arbor made a prompt decision and hurriedly pulled Mo Lien and the others into the star domain. At the same time, two sharp-eyed goshawks descended from the sky. They raised their heads and looked around. The commotion alarmed the Imperial guards guarding the Azure Palace, and they all rushed over. Mo Lien held the soul bead and exchanged a glance with Arbor. Chapter 50-31. Arbor waved his hand, and a swirl of light and shadow appeared in front of his eyes, displaying the scene of the outside world. They saw that a corner of the imperial garden that had been perfectly fine was now obscured by an overwhelming amount of lush vegetation. Many small animals were desperately shuttling through the vines, as if searching for something. In the sky, there were many eagles that had gathered from all directions. One after another, they whistled in the sky above the imperial garden. The royal guards who had heard the commotion were currently clearing away these lush vegetation and killing the eagles circling in the air. Duanyu, Hichin chuckled mischievously and turned to look at Mo Lien, who was holding a soul orb. TSK, once ancient Mo Lien appears, all living things will grow and surge crazily. It truly is super attractive. Arbor breathed a sigh of relief. He saw a little tree ant running over while brandishing its branches and twirling in front of them twice. Master, master. The little tree ant Chocho called out, I wanted to tell you earlier. Ancient Mo Lien's soul orb can't be taken out so casually. Look, the surrounding vegetation has all gone crazy. These low-level animals and plants don't have any intelligence. Instead, it's that newborn calves that aren't afraid of tigers. And those mystic and spirit beasts that have gained intelligence don't dare to casually approach after smelling your scent. Arbor expressionlessly swept Chocho a glance. Why are you always giving advice in hindsight? A trace of bewilderment hung on Chocho's wooden face. He glanced at his little master and said aggrievedly, my memory isn't that good. I only remember some things when it happens. Arbor rolled his eyes at him, disinclined to say anything more to this guy. It wasn't that this guy's memory wasn't that good, it was that his memory was extremely bad. Xiao Mu turned around to look at the scene inside the demonic pupil's vortex. She saw the sage beastman snake looking left and right, as if trying to find where they had gone. GC, Old Zhou, Shen Wu, and the others were also helping the royal guards chop down the various vegetation that had sprung up in the surroundings. Arbor turned his head and glared at his husband. At that moment, Prince Mo was looking down at the soul orb in his hand, wondering if he should find a quiet place to absorb the ancient Mo Lien's soul orb. Abruptly sensing his wife glaring at him, Crown Prince Mo quickly looked up and returned his wife's warm smile. Chow, what are you glaring at hubby for? Hubby has already hand-copied the Little Emperor's Sutra 100 times just now, so he has already deeply recognized his past mistakes. He definitely won't commit them again, so you can't glare at me anymore. We've already copied and punished. It's time we reconcile. Duanyu and Hichin both thought at the same time, Mo Lien, this guy, he's usually aloof and incomparably proper in front of outsiders, but when he's in front of Jojo, he's like a completely different person. His words and actions are especially shameless. Then they thought, Jojo, that stoic and wooden face, had the attitude of not even bothering to speak more than a few words to you in the early years. If it weren't for the fact that Mo Lien was like a cockroach, stubbornly seizing every opportunity and shamelessly pestering her, perhaps they really wouldn't have been able to get close to her so quickly. Mo Lien walked up to his wife with a grin. Sensing gazes from both sides, he narrowed his phoenix eyes and turned to look at them. This guy glared back at Duan Yu and He Chen's gazes before reaching out to hold his wife's hand, saying with a chuckle, "Jojo, your husband copied the Little Emperor's sutra the entire morning and hasn't eaten a mouthful of hot porridge yet." Xiao Mu grabbed him with a backhand. Chapter 50-32. He dragged Mo Lien to the main planet at once. As soon as the two of them set foot on the main planet, they immediately sensed that the surrounding divine power was much stronger than the other star zones. Mo Lien was pleasantly surprised. "We can have rotten peach blossom and the others come here to cultivate in the future. The divine power here is almost on par with holy power." As far as the two of them could see, it was a stretch of fine jade dragons. The Jade River meandered and was emerald green. It looked like water but wasn't water, like a jade river that slowly extended into the distance. A light breeze brushed past their faces, and waves of a tranquil and clean fragrance dispersed. Occasionally, a few peach blossom petals would flutter and land on the emerald jade river. With a gentle ripple, they would drift away along the jade river that resembled a dragon vein. This scene made him feel carefree and happy. The two of them looked at each other, and the little stoic harumphed with a taut face. "Just stay here and absorb the soul orbs." "Wife, I just came back." Mo Lien glanced at her aggrievedly. "Actually, there's no rush." "What did you say?" Okay, I'll absorb, I'll go absorb right now." Mo Lien thought about it again. The first few lines of the Little Emperor's sayings were, "Everything Jojo says is right, so you must accept it obediently." After copying the Little Emperor's sayings 100 times, Mo Lien believed she could recite them backwards. Sir Jojo nodded solemnly with a pair of small paws behind his back. Then, he led her towards their small courtyard. The small courtyard was encircled by fine jade dragons, like a pearl in the vast ocean. As soon as they entered the courtyard, they immediately smelled a faint and mellow fragrance. Arbor's eyes lit up. He tugged Mo Lien's hand and pulled him to the back of the small room. Then, he took out an appearance talisman again and threw it out. A palace in the distance was like a veil that had been pulled open, revealing itself before them. Bit by bit, from the sharp corners of the eaves to the painted walls and corridors, then to the blue bricks and glazed tiles, the enormous palace appeared one by one. Although this was not the first time she had seen it, Mo Lien still felt that it was visually stunning. What greeted his line of sight was a towering tree with colorful spherical flowers. One flower after another fell heavily on the branches. Between the fine leaves, there was occasionally a small golden peanut that was faintly discernible. Jojo's eyes lit up. He pulled Mo Lien forward and sat on a tree branch. He took out a golden peanut and waved it in front of Mo Lien. Longevity fruit. Chocho said last time that the longevity fruits had already appeared, but there weren't many of them. There were only 5 of them on the entire tree. "Jojo, it really looks like peanuts." It was only the length of a finger and looked very similar to peanut. However, this longevity fruit was golden all over and felt like ice or jade in her hand. It was cool and refreshing. When she sniffed it up close, it emitted a pleasant fragrance that seeped into her heart. It naturally couldn't be an ordinary peanut. "One for you, one for me, one for Duan Yu, one for Rotten Peach Blossom, and one for Big Brother First." Arbor grinned. This fruit contained extremely powerful energy. It was guaranteed that everyone would improve more or less after eating it. "Jojo, can you eat this?" "Yes." Sir Jojo nodded repeatedly. If I can't absorb the extremely powerful energy inside, I still have Chocho, Little Water, and Little Earth to help me absorb it. That was to be expected. Xiao Qiao's Dantian star domain was supported by the sacred wood, sacred water, and sacred earth. No matter how strong the power was, it was impossible for it to cause any impact through her body. Mo Lian only relaxed after thinking this. Chapter 50-33. The little stoic suddenly raised her stiff little face. Don't be long-winded. Hurry up and go cultivate your cultivation. Mo Lian coughed lightly and stroked her face. Jojo, how can you change your face so quickly? Sir Jojo harumphed and brushed his hand away, roaring, cultivate properly. Mo Lian twitched his mouth. Seeing that the little fellow was about to jump off the longevity tree, he hastily pulled her into his embrace and chuckled softly. Wife, you're naughty. You didn't even hug your husband when you saw him this time. Look, your husband has hand-copied Jojo's quotes 100 times and admitted his mistake. We should make up, right? Jojo chuckled as the corners of her mouth curled downwards, her expression non-committal. Wife Jojo. Mo Lian's eyes wavered, and a faint smile surfaced on his lips. He raised his hand to rub the little stoic's stomach. It will take at least 2 to 3 days for hubby to absorb. For darling Mo's sake, please forgive hubby for swish. Mo Lian had just placed his hand on Jojo's stomach when he felt a burst of energy emanating from inside, abruptly jolting his hand several inches away. He was stupefied and looked down at his wife's stomach with a strange expression. He exclaimed in shock, Jojo, it. Arbor glanced at him and absent-mindedly stroked his stomach, pacifying the agitated baby Mo, making a fuss over nothing. The little stoic said expressionlessly, can't you tell? Baby Mo doesn't like you very much. Mo Lian's eyes instantly widened, and he hugged his wife and shouted, Why? What did I do? Why am I not welcomed? You lied to Jojo. Mo Lian's mouth twitched, and then he hugged his little wife and swayed her back and forth, assuring repeatedly, I won't lie to Jojo again in the future, I swear. Let's forget about what happened in the undersea abyss. Jojo, answer me. Smile. Ha. Mo Lian chuckled. He lowered his head and kissed his wife on the cheek. He raised his hand and touched her belly. Jojo, now that I think about it, I'm still scared. If he dawdled in the abyss of the sacrificial sea for half a year without finding a way out, wouldn't he miss the most important moment in his wife's life, and baby Mo's birth? That's why we shouldn't let that snake off so easily. Arbor snorted and rubbed his belly angrily. If I secretly beat him up, what do you think my chances of winning are? You're alone. Arbor nodded. Mo Lian, if he said there was no chance of winning, would he suffer his wife's violent beating first? How about this, Little Water, Little Earth, Little Traiant, and the others are all idle. Also, Chirpy, Phoenix, Little White, and the others, it's better to gather them and find a moonless and windy night to gang up on him. The little stoic pursed her lips. She was quite flexible and immediately said, then we'll put it on the tab first. When my Ming, Chirpy, and the others advance to mature sacred beasts, we'll find him to fight. Mo Lian smiled until his eyes turned into crescents. He nodded repeatedly and said, that's great. As he spoke, he reached out again and rubbed Jojo's belly. This time, he wasn't shaken off by the child's disdain. Jojo, have you heard of the kingdom of Doluo? Arbor couldn't help but be startled, and he turned to look at him seriously. You met Lily, Mo Lian nodded solemnly. Chapter 50-34. That number 0. Arbor blinked. Weren't these Lily heirs a bit unlucky? According to that state preceptor Shinto Jing, Lily, number 9 was slaughtered by Duan Yu, and Lily, number 5 was disposed of by Ming Yasi. As for this number 0, according to Shinto Jing, she followed the state preceptor to the river of forgetfulness and miserably encountered Jojo's lotus. Her ending definitely wouldn't be too pleasant. I encountered their state preceptor Shin Nangue and this whatever Lily, number 0 at the river of forgetfulness. Mo Lien recounted the events with a sullen face. When she mentioned Lily, number 0, anger flitted across her eyes. Although he had already executed this number 0, Prince Mo felt like he had eaten a fly whenever he recalled her disgusting face. Just the thought of it made him feel disgusted. Lily, number 0, revealed a piece of information before her death. The Kingdom of Daluo is planning to attack Dragon Flame City. Arbor was taken aback, and then sat up straight. But I heard from Duan Yu that this is merely a tiny kingdom of the prairie. They wanted to attack the imperial capital of the Divine Province. What a joke. Yes, but since this attack has been planned for a long time, there must be something special to rely on. If we're talking about backing, could it be that they've already colluded with the Heavenly Providence? Very likely. Mo Lien nodded. Moreover, there's a type of people called puppet masters everywhere in the Kingdom of Daluo. I'm afraid there's also a problem. Arbor nodded. Don't worry, you absorb ancient Mo Lien first. I'll set off for Dragon Flame City. Mo Lien made a sound of agreement and held her hand. Remember to be careful on the road. Okay. Arbor was silent for a moment before saying, the Heavenly Providence, Duan Yu already mentioned it to me. Mo Lien nodded and said, it seems that the Qin estate has a history with zombies. They probably haven't been making this zombie mutation drug for more than 1 or 2 generations. This was probably already a set of family businesses. Arbor sighed. Then he thought of something and glanced at Mo Lien. You fought with Duan Yu. Mo Lien hastily shook her head like a rattledrum. No, how could I fight with brother Duan Yu? We haven't seen each other for a long time and missed each other, so we decided to exchange some pointers. Arbor rolled his eyes at him. You even flattened the pomegranate tree in front of my house. Really? Mo Lien hugged her and smiled. I'll plant a few hundred more for you later. You're always so talkative. Arbor pushed his face away and snorted. You stay here and cultivate. I'll go look for them first. Then, he tossed the golden longevity fruit into his mouth. His eyes lit up. Delicious. Sir Jojo's figure flickered and disappeared from the main planet. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh and shake her head. When Arbor reappeared beside Duan Yu and the others, 15 minutes had already passed. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal laughed. That guy went to cultivate. Arbor nodded and opened his palm, revealing 2 golden peanuts. The longevity fruit is ripe. 1 for each of us. It's delicious. You ate it. Duan Yu couldn't help being startled, and then he looked her up and down. Yes. Xiao Mu nodded expressionlessly. I'm eating it for Chocho. After Chocho absorbs the longevity fruit's energy, I'll eat it. I'll go out now. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal quickly picked one up and threw it into his mouth. His expression was exactly the same as Arbor's. Delicious. Duan Yu was rather speechless. Are you here to judge if it's delicious or not? Shouldn't he be evaluating the effects of his advancement? Chapter 50-35. The reason Jojo ate the longevity fruit was actually because this foodie was curious about the taste of the longevity fruit. Arbor turned to look at the duo seriously. Peach Blossom, do you want to go to the main planet to accompany Mo Lien? Hu Shichin was speechless. Why should I accompany him? I thought the two of you liked to hang out together. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist rolling his eyes. He really wanted to ask his Jojo, what exactly makes you think that I like hanging out with Mo Lien? Do I have nothing better to do than to stay at his place and watch him intentionally or unintentionally flaunt his affection all day long, calling me wifey and stabbing me in the heart with arrows every day? Bah, it's not like I'm sick. Don't the two of you like to go here and there and brave through fire and water together? Hu Shichin, when Jojo said this, he actually felt that he had no words to refute. It seemed that he and Mo Lien, this pair of fellow sufferers, had indeed been through water and through fire and fire. Duan Yu chuckled and coughed lightly. Peach Blossom, just go to the main planet. I think you definitely won't want to go to any other star domain. Hu Shichin's eyes lit up. In that case, that main planet is very different from the other star domains. Of course. All right then. Hu Shichin pursed his lips and said reluctantly, I think Mo Lien should also have a lot of difficulties absorbing the ancient Mo Lien soul orb, so I'll go check on him. Duan Yu and Arbor exchanged glances and couldn't resist chuckling. This guy just didn't mean what he said. He was clearly worried that something would go wrong when Mo Lien advanced, so he spoke haughtily and coquettishly. Peach Blossom Immortal, don't be greedy for the jade dragons flowing on the main planet. Arbor waved his hand and handed the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal to the main planet as he instructed him. A certain venerable immortal harumphed and muttered to himself, I'm not a foodie like you. Arbor used his demonic pupil to observe for a moment before purposely finding a deserted place and flashing out with Duan Yu. As soon as the two of them revealed their auras, the holy beast serpent sensed them and came over. It looked around and said, Hey, why is it only the two of you? Where are they? Who is it? Arbor looked at him with a serious face and asked knowingly. Brad Mo. And Little Peach Blossom, where are they? Arbor pursed his lips. Little Mo, Little Peach Blossom, they called each other so intimately. Those who didn't know would really think that they were good brothers. Fierce girl, don't go. Where did you stuff my brother Mo and brother Peach Blossom to? It's none of your business. Arbor snapped at him before turning to look at GC and the others. GC only felt that the little girl's eyes were sharp and abnormally sharp. She hurriedly bowed and saluted, I don't know what orders mistress has. Get ready. We'll set off tomorrow. Yes. GC and the others hurriedly cupped their hands in acknowledgement. They didn't dare to ask where to set off and why they didn't see their master. Arbor turned to look at Duan Yu. I'm afraid there's a change in Dragonflame City. I have to leave first. In about 3 months, I'll have Huang He, Senior Qin Chi, and the others bring back the 30,000 members of the Heavenly Fate Legion. I'll arrange for them to stay here with you. Okay. Duan Yu nodded. Thankfully, she had set up several layers of concealment and defense talisman matrices on her private island, Snow Island, so the aftermath could be considered peaceful. She received Senior Qin Chi's message 2 days ago, and everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Chapter 50-36. There were 30,000 elites keeping watch on the snowy island. Even if Heavenly Fate's people wanted to attack the snowy island, they had to first consider whether this deal was worth it or not. Jojo, I'll send someone to escort you back. Arbor quickly shook her head and tilted her head. I'll use a teleportation talisman matrix. As long as I don't encounter any baddies who block my divine senses on the way, we'll set off tomorrow morning and reach the outskirts of Dragonflame City by sunset. Me. The serpent was invigorated and hastily ran over to curry favor. Fierce girl, don't worry. As long as I'm by your side, no one can block your divine senses. Except for the condensing mirror, the serpent added in his mind. However, the sacred spirit of the condensing mirror had also disappeared at this time. It was probably with the Mo Lien brothers. Just now, the serpent didn't say anything when he sensed the presence of the divine realm opening on the little stoic's body. Presumably, the sudden disappearance of the Mo Lien brothers and the Peach Blossom brothers was closely related to the divine realm. Since they didn't want to reveal it, he also didn't pursue the matter. However, the juniors nowadays really had all kinds of mysterious treasures on them. It was truly breathtaking. Duan Yu glanced at the serpent and warned coldly, "You must be careful in everything you do. If anything happens to Jojo, you know what will happen." Zuolan Shan returned to his senses and inexplicably shuddered. He thought, why do I feel like the juniors nowadays are each more ruthless than the last? He pursed his lips and said, "Fierce girl, don't doubt me. I made a bet with the Peach Blossom brothers and lost a year's time. In this 1 year, I will stay by your side and protect you all. As a senior sacred beast, I naturally won't lie to a junior like you. We agreed on a year, so it's a year. In this 1 year, no matter where you go, I will accompany you. Even if you overturn the heavens, I will tidy things up properly for you." Arbor couldn't help but be startled. What bet? Speaking of this, he really shed bitter tears. Arbor didn't notice GC and the others beside her and twitched her mouth several times. The past was unbearable to recall. Zuolanshan snorted and waved his hand. "You don't need to know that. You only need to know that I won't harm you. I will protect you and block everything for you. That's enough." Sir Jojo glanced at Snake Man a few times and suddenly felt that this guy seemed to be more pleasing to the eye. Since he had already said that he would protect her for a year and be her bodyguard, why would he do that? Then she was too embarrassed to think about revenge, nor could she gather Chocho and the others to gang up on him. The snake person abruptly felt a chill drifting over his head, and he glanced at Xiao Mu in confusion. "All right then," the little stoic said aloofly with a cold expression. Since this fellow was so tactful, then she would reluctantly make peace with him for the time being. "Tomorrow morning, we will use the teleportation array to set off." Jojo and Xingho, Arbor's footsteps paused. Frowning, his voice was cold and merciless. "Those who kill me will go to hell before me." Duan Yu's lips curved, and he nodded with a smile. "Okay." That night, news of Xingho's suicide by ingesting poison came from the prison. His Majesty issued a decree to confiscate the Marquis of Anqing's estate. All of the estate's wealth was used as military supplies to prepare for war. Although Xingho's family was pardoned from death, they were implicated by the Marquis and were exiled to the borders to cultivate dry land. The Marquis of Anqing's estate, which used to be incomparably glorious, declined overnight and was no longer the same as before. Chapter 50-37. Early the next morning, Arbor bid farewell to Duan Yu and left by activating a transportation talisman matrix under Duan Yu's watchful gaze. Jojo's figure was far away in the blink of an eye. Duan Yu only felt as if something had been dug out of his heart, and he stood there in a daze for a long time. Until Aunt Yuanjin's voice was heard. "Miss Wu, you're a step too late. The young crown princess has already left using the transportation talisman matrix." "Ah. She left in such a hurry," Wu Ruame exclaimed. "Oh my, we agreed to go for a morning outing yesterday, so I waited outside the palace, but I didn't see the crown princess come out, so I entered the palace to take a look." Yuanjin couldn't help twitching her mouth as she inwardly mused, "Then you really waited for nothing. The young crown princess sleeps until the sun is high in the sky every day, so going for a spring outing can only wait until the afternoon, right? Furthermore, That day when you chatted with the Crown Princess for the entire afternoon, I truly didn't hear you mention the words morning. Waking up in the morning was very important, but the Crown Princess simply couldn't wake up in the morning. I even brought her fresh pears, so why did she leave? Wu Ruame wrung her hands as she loudly grumbled, "Oh my, I haven't heard her finish telling me about Princess Wushuang yet. Dolly, quickly return to the estate and pack your things." "Ah. Miss, where are we going?" her personal maidservant meekly asked. "Hey, is there a need to ask?" Wu Ruame loudly instructed. "Let's go, we're going to the Divine Province for a stroll. I hit it off with the Crown Princess at first sight, so how can she run away before we're done chatting? Really, quickly return home and pack your things. We're leaving immediately." "Oh, but miss, where are we going to find the Crown Princess in the Divine Province? You won't admit it even if I say you're stupid. Of course it's the Imperial Capital. If the Crown Princess isn't in the Imperial Capital, where else could she be?" When Duan Yu returned to his senses, he heard Wu Ruame's boisterous words, and his heart skipped a beat. Wu Ruame was going to find Charles, so why couldn't he go? It was such a simple thing to meet Jojo whenever he wanted to. Once he was done with the matters at hand, he would also go to Shenzhou to meet Jojo. On the other side, the rune array flashed, and Arbor walked out with GC, Old Zhou, and the others. He held an open map in his small hand and looked at it expressionlessly. The corner of Shenwu's mouth twitched. He coughed lightly and said, "Crown Princess, our direction shouldn't be wrong. However, the teleportation is sometimes far and sometimes near. Sometimes it appears on the mountains and rivers, and sometimes it falls into the water. It's not very reliable." The corner of GC's eyes twitched, but she didn't say anything. Shenwu continued, "Crown Princess, why don't we take a closer look at the map in your hands?" When they came out of the teleportation portal, Old Zhou stepped on a swordfish. Everyone was caught off guard and fell into the water one after another. Thinking back on it now, the expressions on their companions' faces were truly quite fascinating. The little Crown Princess didn't show any expression and merely humphed softly from her small nose. She flicked the talisman array in her hand, and the rune array enveloped them again. With a whoosh, everyone's mouths twitched, and they immediately disappeared on the spot. A dozen or so breaths later, everyone stepped out of the talisman array on guard, prepared to jump into water or fire. However, after the talisman array dispersed, they discovered a small flat slope in front of them. What entered their eyes was a barren field of withered grass. The little stoic picked up that map again and looked it up and down before saying aloofly, "Take a look." Chapter 5038. Shenwu was at a loss for words. He thought to himself, why was the little Crown Princess looking at the map horizontally and vertically just now? She was looking all over the map, but in the end, she didn't understand it at all. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but cough. He pointed at a corner of the map and said, "Crown Princess, look. If we go any further, we should be at the 10-mile slope. According to the map, this 10-mile slope is 3 miles outside of Dragonflame City. I suggest, let's change to an air transportation spirit artifact and go there. We should be able to reach the Imperial Capital before sunset." GC, Old Zhou, and the others quickly nodded in agreement. What a joke. They could fly a few miles. There was no need to use that damn talisman array. The little Crown Princess thought for 2 seconds with her hands behind her back. Then, she nodded reluctantly. Shenwu felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He hurriedly gave Old Zhou and the others a look. The latter understood and took out a pocket-sized air transportation spirit artifact. After injecting divine power, the spirit artifact rapidly expanded as though it was filled with air. Everyone entered the spirit artifact cabin one after another. After setting the route forward, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the little crown princess was sensible and didn't insist on using a transportation talisman array. Otherwise, it would really be a trap. Although this was a directional talisman array, the transportation distance was sometimes short and sometimes far. It wasn't easy to control. The little crown princess sat at the side with a stoic expression. Shenwu was just about to speak to her when he heard the little crown princess say, "There's movement up ahead." Indeed, not long after, Shenwu and the others heard the thunderous rumbling of iron hooves coming from below. Arbor drew an invisibility talisman in the air and pushed it outward. A purple talisman power flashed outside the entire spirit artifact cabin. The air transportation spirit artifact immediately disappeared from the sky. In next to no time, the dust from the four hooves completely covered the heavens and the earth. A large brown-furred wolf carrying a middle-aged short-bearded man wearing a battle helmet dashed below Arbor and the others' air transportation spirit artifact. The Vanguard Battalion reports that an air transportation spirit artifact of unknown origin has appeared in front of the slope. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and looked around. Why is there nothing here? A young general beside him also couldn't help but look around curiously. Just now, when I was looking from afar, I seemed to have seen an air transportation spirit tool. There's no way it could fly so fast. General Hato. The young general approached the middle-aged general and said in a low voice, could it be that he panicked and abandoned his air transportation spiritual tool to escape after discovering that our wolf squad was attacking? The middle-aged general named Haduo snorted coldly and raised his hand. Search everywhere. Don't let go of any suspicious places. We must not let this person go to the royal manor in the outskirts and destroy our defenses. Once Grand State Preceptor Larry arrives, we'll make our move. At this moment, Xiao Mu and company were openly hiding above this Haduo general's head, openly eavesdropping on the enemy's conversation. The human snake glanced at Xiao Mu strangely, a hint of shock surreptitiously hidden in his gaze. He kept pondering in his mind, he didn't expect this fierce girl's talisman skills to be so impressive. She could casually draw an invisibility talisman in the air and hide the entire air transportation spirit artifact. Not a single one of the many good-for-nothings below them noticed their whereabouts. It was obvious how formidable this little stoic was. After Hato ordered his men to search everywhere to no avail, he could only beat the gong to withdraw his troops. Arbor coldly watched the wolf squad retreat to the outskirts of Dragonflame City and said in a low voice, "Follow them and take a look." The kingdom of Duoluo really dared to attack. How audacious! Chapter 5039. The flying spirit artifact circled in the air and quietly followed the Haduo general back to the Wang Manor on the outskirts of the capital. This Wang Manor was basically under the control of the Duoluo army. Shenwu was puzzled. This place is so close to Dragonflame City. How come the city guards know nothing about it? He had never heard of the Duoluo country before. He didn't know which small country it was. How come they suddenly had the courage to attack the capital of the Divine Prefecture? Arbor glanced down and drew several invisibility talismans in the air. She flicked them. The talismans immediately entered everyone's bodies. Let's go down and take a look. This matter was indeed strange. Wang Manor was located on the outskirts of Dragonflame City. It was less than 3 miles away. The Duoluo army had more than 5,000 people. How come they didn't know about such a big commotion? It could be seen that the city guards had either rebelled or met with misfortune. Arbor didn't want to think of the human heart as too complicated, but in reality, the human heart was the most unreliable thing in the world. Shenwu quietly put away the flying spirit artifact and landed with Arbor and the others. The originally bustling Wang Manor was now closed in front of all the doors and a lifeless atmosphere. Arbor led Shenwu and the others from Zhuolan Mountain past the decorated archway of Wang Manor and walked along the flagstone path. They walked for about 10 minutes. At the same time, Sir Jojo suddenly turned his head and met two gazes with a sharp gaze. A young woman was half leaning on the window and looking out. She suddenly felt a chill and hurriedly shrank her head back. Why did it feel like something ferocious had passed through the window just now? The woman patted her chest and took a deep breath. She felt that she might have been overthinking. Many unfamiliar cultivators had flooded into Wang Manor in large numbers in the wee hours of this morning. Her father-in-law was the mayor, but now he was being controlled by someone. Their entire family's lives were in the other's hands. They didn't dare to act rashly and could only obey orders. The other had the mayor order everyone to stay in their homes and not go out without orders. An entire morning had passed. Their entire family was on tenterhooks and didn't know what was going on. The room was dark and gloomy, and the 6 members of the mayor's family were huddled together at the table. Seeing the woman walk over, the mayor's wife hurriedly asked, "How is it outside?" "Nothing at all." The mayor's wife sighed. "I'm afraid this matter won't end well. If there's a chance later, you and Ahong will immediately take the children away." Clang! The door was kicked open, and Haduo and Guer walked in. Their cold aura entered the room, scaring the 2 young children. They quickly hid in the arms of the old woman. The mayor's wife tried her best to remain calm, but her heart was beating like a drum. The 2 generals were intimidating and exuded a murderous aura. It was not something that ordinary people like them could contend against. Holding a horsewhip in his hand, Guer grinned at the 2 children hypocritically. "Lord Mayor, we need you to stand out and gather all the townspeople." "What exactly do you want?" The mayor braced himself and asked. "All of us in Wang Manor town are honest and normal people. We have never made enemies. Xiozha Darren, why do you appear?" Guer's whip landed on the table and split it in half. "Wah!" The 2 children started to cry loudly. Chapter 50-40. The mayor's wife hurriedly covered the children's mouths with her hand and shrank back in horror. "Please, Lord Mayor. Now you can have everyone come out and go to the gathering." The old mayor stood up shakily, took out the sound-amplifying mystic weapon he usually used to summon people, and took a deep breath. There were about 400 to 500 people in Wangzhuang town. At this time, they were all summoned to the gathering. Everyone didn't know the reason and looked at each other. Upon seeing this, Xiao Mu stealthily distributed transformation talismans to Mount Zhuolan, Shenwu, and the others. The group simply showed themselves openly and stealthily mixed into the crowd of normal citizens, gathering at the venue with the crowd of Royal Manor town residents. Around the gathering, there were thousands of soldiers from the state of Daluo, all wearing short armor and red feathered helmets. The townspeople of Wangzhuang town gathered together somewhat timidly. In the cold weather, even if there was a faint ray of sunlight on the horizon, everyone still felt cold in their hearts. Arbor stood in the crowd, looking left and right at the shriveled crowd. He suddenly felt as if he had returned to the Quoto village from several years ago. At that time, they were also this weak. When faced with the bullying of the Heavenly Tao sect, none of the villagers dared to speak. They only dared to watch silently, hiding on the side like walking corpses. They dared to be angry but didn't dare to speak. Today, it was still the same. In a different place, with a different group of people, nothing had changed. They were still a flock of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Weakness was indeed the original sin. Arbor frowned and looked forward. That Doluo General Hajuo stood on a stone pier half the height of a person, staring at the townspeople of Wangzhuang town below with bright eyes. He turned his head and gave his Deputy General Gu Er a look. The young general immediately walked to the front of the crowd with half a whip and asked with a chuckle, "Lord Mayor, is everyone here?" The old mayor and his family stood at the front of the crowd. When he heard Gu Er's question, his body trembled and he nodded silently. Gu Er smiled. "Since everyone is here, let's bring them over." As soon as he finished speaking, there was the sound of iron chains swaying beside him. Everyone felt their hearts tighten as they subconsciously gathered closer to the center. Hua hua, hua hua. A chain as thick as an arm was dragged over from afar. Standing beside Arbor was a girl about her age, about 16 or 17 years old. Because of her nervousness, her round face was covered with fine beads of sweat. Arbor could clearly hear her rapid breathing, and it seemed that her heart was beating faster. "Ah!" the crowd suddenly exclaimed. Everyone looked along the long iron chain and saw two large iron cages more than a meter high being dragged over by 4 or 5 strong men. Clack, 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 clack. The friction between the cages and the ground produced a series of rough and ear-piercing sounds. In the cage, there were 2 monsters whose faces could not be seen clearly. Their hair was messy and drooped on their foreheads. A pair of small, blood-red eyes were staring at them through the cage. Arbor thoughtfully looked at the iron cage a few more times. Looking at the 2 zombies locked in the cage, one big and one small, he felt a sense of déjà vu looking at their figures. One of them seemed to be a boy. Wait! Arbor's eyes flashed, and his sharp gaze once again swept past the 2 monsters in the cage. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. They seemed to be the Fong siblings he met on Lotus Pond Island. "I worked overtime until 10 o'clock today, so I came back too late. I'll sleep first and make up for 2 more chapters tomorrow. Happy New Year. I still have to work overtime tomorrow, so I don't know when I'll be back. I'll probably make up for it later." Chapter 50-41. The townspeople of Wangzhuang town all looked terrified as they took a few steps back in unison. Many townspeople huddled together. Other than the sound of each other's heavy breathing, there seemed to be no other sound between heaven and earth in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the scene of 400 to 500 people was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. The girl next to Arbor was nervously pinching the corner of her clothes when she suddenly turned her head to glance at Arbor. In other people's eyes, Arbor currently looked like a woman in her early 30s with a face full of freckles. Arbor also couldn't do anything about this transformation talisman when her image became so terrible. This transformation talisman was too random. Depending on its mood, it could transform however it wanted. In any case, it couldn't escape the word ugly. "Hey aunt," the girl called out to Arbor timidly. Arbor instantly felt like fucking a dog, and her gaze swept coolly over the girl. "Aunt." The exquisite and adorable Sir Jojo was actually called Aunt. "Who's your aunt?" "Your whole family is your aunt." The round-faced girl didn't understand why Arbor was looking at her with such a strange gaze, and she whispered timidly, Aunt, can we still escape?" Arbor glanced at her. At a moment of life and death, naturally even if there's only a slim chance of survival, we still have to fight with our lives. The round-faced girl nodded and surreptitiously took out a wood-chopping knife from behind her waist. She muttered, Aunt, I think these people aren't decent people. Later, let's seize the moment and charge out. Arbor glanced at the kitchen knife in this fellow's hand, and the corner of her mouth secretly twitched. In the little stoic's opinion, it was enough to have a valiant heart that didn't fear death. At least among these people she was about to save, there were at least some who dared to come out and fight against fate. Zhualanshan glanced at the thing in the iron cage and lowered his voice to ask Arbor, "Xiao Qiao, what's in this cage?" Why did it feel like the whole world had changed after he woke up from his hibernation for over 100 years? In the past, he had never seen such an ugly creature. It was howling and panting in the cage. It looked like a human, but not like a beast. It gave people an indescribable feeling. Arbor glanced at him and silently took out a book from his inner world. He patted it lightly in Zhualanshan's hand and said, "Study it when you have time. The world today is very different from before you hibernated." Zhualanshan's hand inexplicably trembled, and a thought flashed through his mind. Does this stoic face have a special hobby of handing out pamphlets to people? He flipped open the booklet titled Corpse Puppet Guide, and saw a picture of a rotting corpse on the first page. There was a small line of words on it: beginner-level corpse puppet, likes to bite people, the speed at which its corpse poison spreads is low, and its walking speed is very slow. Zhualanshan's hands trembled again. The zombie on the first page of the booklet was really lifelike, as if it was about to jump out of the paper. If he studied it in the middle of the night, his heart would probably be greatly affected. He hastily slapped the booklet shut and turned to give Jojo a kind smile. The little stoic glanced at him. "These two in front of us have evolved to intermediate-level corpse puppets at most." However, 2 intermediate-level corpse puppets were enough to scare a group of mortals. When mortals saw such terrifying things, they would definitely be so scared that they wouldn't be able to walk. Chapter 50-42. Just like now, when the townspeople saw them open the iron cages and drag out the 2 corpse puppets, they were so frightened that they couldn't stop screaming. The pale-faced women in the front row couldn't keep their legs steady and fell to the ground. The Fong siblings were sprawled on the ground, crawling on all fours, but their speed was very fast. Miss Fong passed through the crowd in an instant and roared at a fat woman who had fallen to the ground. The fat woman's eyes rolled back, and she actually fainted from fright. "Ha ha ha!" The mocking laughter of the Dororo soldiers came from all around, mixed with a few curses. "So this is all there is to the people under the feet of the Emperor of the Divine Prefecture." 2 mid-level corpse puppets scared them to this extent. They really are a bunch of flowers in a greenhouse, so well protected. Could it be that they never even knew what corpse puppets looked like before? After the mockery, there was a wave of unbridled laughter, one after another. Arbor glanced at these Dororo soldiers from the corner of her eyes and sneered. The small hand by her side suddenly moved slightly. Hundreds of thousands of fiery evil mosquitoes suddenly spread out from between her fingers, flying in all directions. At first, the crowd only felt as if some mosquitoes and flies were flying in front of their eyes, and didn't pay too much attention. But with the cry of a soldier, a fiery prelude began. This person suddenly spat out a ball of fire from his chest, and it inexplicably spread to the people around him. It was so fast that it caught people off guard, and there was no time to defend. The first soldier who was enveloped by the fire quickly shattered into a pile of bones, falling to the ground with a bang. He was deader than dead in a matter of minutes. This unforeseen event not only scared the 400 to 500 Royal Manor townspeople, but also scared the Dororo soldiers to death. This fire inexplicably started burning from within, burning outwards. It was as if a fire had been poured on a person's heart, abruptly igniting it. The crowd didn't know what was going on, and became more and more nervous, unable to control themselves. General Doha shouted angrily, "Don't panic. An enemy has sneaked in." The young deputy general, Guer, was experienced and knowledgeable. He immediately sensed that something was wrong. The young man ordered loudly, "Don't panic. Pay attention to whether there are any strange objects around you. Activate your defensive profound artifacts first. Defend. Defend. The soldiers of the Luo kingdom shouted in panic. One after another, they activated their defensive Xian weapons and looked around. Gu Er's judgment was very accurate. He immediately discovered that there seemed to be many tiny mosquitoes around the Doro soldiers. Mosquito. It's a mosquito. Damn it. Activate your defensive barriers. Don't let these mosquitoes get close to you. General Hajuo was so angry that his nose was almost crooked when he saw his soldiers being targeted by these tiny mosquitoes one after another, and dying from the inside out one after another. This was truly an unforeseen event. Before the main forces arrived, they planned to camp here for 1 or 2 days. Unexpectedly, before the battle had even begun, his soldiers had inexplicably attracted a swarm of mosquitoes, and dozens of them had been killed. This really wasn't a good sign. Could this be a sign that the future siege would not be easy to fight? General Hajuo's face darkened as he loudly berated his soldiers. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.